As night begins to fold itself inward and the final echoes of a long day slowly dissolve into quiet, our minds start to grow loud in their own secret ways. The unnamed worries, the questions without answers, the faint longing for a life that feels a little fuller, a little more whole, all of them circle within us like an endless stream refusing to rest. The modern human carries too many layers of noise, so many that we sometimes forget what it feels like to truly listen to ourselves. But tonight, you don't need to hold yourself together any longer. Let me guide you into a journey that moves slowly, gently, a space where everything you need to know about life is whispered through philosophy in the softness of the inner world. As Carl Jung once said, "Who looks outside dreams, who looks inside awakes." In this quiet embrace of the evening, you only need to loosen your breath and allow each thought to unfold like gentle ripples, to feel that true understanding doesn't come from hurried awakenings, but from those slow, tender moments when the mind is allowed to rest before it drifts softly into sleep. When you gently close your eyes and let your breath slip into a slower rhythm, you may begin to sense that behind the wide spreading night before you, another world is quietly unfolding within you. The world of consciousness, soft and unhurried, yet shaping every experience you have ever known, holding the last fragile glimmers of the day and distilling them into the delicate threads that drift across your mind. And though we often believe we are fully awake to everything around us, believing our awareness is complete and transparent, the truth is that the brain moves with far more subtlety, receiving millions of signals each passing second. Light, sound, breath, heartbeat, fleeting emotion, shifting memory, faint worries, all knocking gently at the door of awareness, and yet the mind cannot open that door to all of them, choosing instead only a handful of fragments, a few essential strokes, weaving them into what we call experience, while everything else dissolves like stardust into the vast sky of the unconscious. And when you realize this, you understand why consciousness is both fragile and precious, not a full map of the world, but a thin and shimmering slice your mind selects and projects simply to help you survive. For neuroscientists have long said that if we were forced to process every piece of incoming data at once, we would collapse under the weight, shattered by a storm of endless information, and so the brain becomes a quiet gatekeeper, choosing what you need in this exact moment, even now as you listen to these slow reflections drifting softly through the night. And if you sink a little deeper into stillness, you may sense that consciousness is not merely a point of brightness on the surface of the mind, but a mirror reflecting everything that has ever happened within you. The place where memory is distilled, where emotion becomes meaning, where thought is woven into the story you tell about who you are. And as Carl Jung wrote in The Undiscovered Self, you are what you do, not what you say you'll do. A simple reminder that consciousness does not merely observe, but creates, shapes, and quietly guides every step you take, no matter how small, revealing that awareness is both perception and presence, the subtle signature of your existence within a world far larger than you can hold in view. Yet the wonder of consciousness lies even deeper, in the billions of neurons connecting and firing in delicate flashes, so that a single disrupted point in that system can shift your entire experience, erasing a name, altering a memory, or even blurring the edges of who you believe yourself to be. And in this, you begin to feel how consciousness is never something fixed or pre-given, but something created moment by moment, pulse by pulse, breath by breath, and you, in the silence of this night, are also quietly weaving yourself together in every passing thought, while some philosophers suggest that consciousness is only the surface of a much deeper ocean, the vast realm of the unconscious, built from instinct, childhood imprints, forgotten wounds, and all the things we believe we have released, with Freud insisting that the unconscious directs most of our behavior, leaving consciousness as a small flashlight, illuminating only a tiny corner of the immense internal chamber. And when you think of this, a gentle softening may rise within you, a tender understanding that you do not always know yourself fully, not because you are fragile, but because the human mind is intricate, layered, and immeasurably beautiful. And so your inability to control every thought, or fully interpret every emotion, or explain every sudden reaction, is simply part of being human. For as Nietzsche wrote in Beyond Good and Evil, the mind is a labyrinth. We are all lost in it a little. Yet being lost does not mean you are wrong. For sometimes wandering is how the mind finds its way, and when night gathers you into its quiet arms, consciousness slows, softens, and allows you to witness things the noise of daytime hides. And in this stillness, you may begin to feel how miraculous your existence truly is, because in understanding how consciousness works, you not only understand the world, but begin to understand yourself, seeing that what you feel is not always the whole truth, that some anxieties are merely amplified signals from an overworked corner of the brain. And with that awareness comes a loosening, a forgiving, a gentle release. For consciousness is also the birthplace of our deepest questions of meaning, happiness, purpose. And though these questions sometimes tire us, they are proof that you are alive, feeling, present, and as you approach the end of this part of the journey, let the understanding of consciousness become a quiet door opening before you, leading toward the next reflections in this night's path. For knowing consciousness is only the beginning, with countless layers beneath still waiting to be seen, and as we close this first part to step into the next, hold on to this slow breath, this spreading calm in your chest, and follow it deeper into the inner world where each unfolding layer brings you closer to the peace you have always been seeking. And as the quiet reflections on consciousness continue to ripple outward like the final waves across the surface of the mind's lake, we begin to realize that the journey inward is not so different from the journey through the world that shifts around us each passing day. And from that intimate realm of neurons and flickering electrical currents, we drift slowly into another space, the space of invisible systems moving silently through modern life. And if consciousness is a small lantern illuminating the inner world, then AI is like an endless ribbon of light stretching across the outer one, revealing what we could never see on our own. So gently we step from part one into part two, as though crossing a thin doorway between two dimensions, the inner world of mind and the outer world of technology, both blending into one another in ways we understand and in ways we cannot yet fully grasp. For even in the stillness of night, when you believe you are separate from the noise of the world, artificial intelligence is quietly at work around you in subtle ways you hardly notice, present when you play a final song at the end of the day, when you watch a soft video to ease your thoughts, when you travel a familiar road, or when you search for a small answer to something your heart has been wrestling with, and AI stands beside you like a silent companion, not intervening but lifting the weight of decision from your shoulders, offering exactly what you seek at the moment you need it, sometimes even before you have found the words to ask. And when we look more deeply at AI's presence in everyday life, we see it functioning almost like a second layer of human awareness, an external field of perception formed from countless pieces of data, habits, emotions, choices, and traces of ourselves that we leave behind each day. For your phone knows what music soothes you at night. The recommendation system sense when you're tired or sad or reaching for something gentle to lean on. GPS understands the roads you choose, those for haste, those for quiet, and all of it moves softly around you, so naturally that we often forget there is a vast system learning from every small movement we make. And isn't it strange? a form of intelligence without a heart or emotion that somehow understands us more than we understand ourselves. Yet this is not the frightening thought many assume it to be, for AI merely reflects what we place into it, learning from the complexity of human nature, from our desires, our hesitations, our unspoken patterns. And if we are the original, then AI is only the sketch, the mirror of data returning to us the qualities we are too hurried to notice within ourselves. And in Thus Spoke Zarathustra, Nietzsche wrote, "And if you gaze long into an abyss, the abyss also gazes into you." And though the line carries many interpretations, tonight we may borrow it to remind ourselves that anything we look into long enough, even technology, begins to reflect our essence back at us. For AI is not an abyss, but a reflection, showing us the choices we repeat, the habits we cultivate, and sometimes even the quiet fears we never name. Yet AI does not judge, or does not love, does not resent, does not seek to change you or steer you. It simply learns, and in this perfect neutrality, it becomes a rare kind of mirror, one that distorts nothing, embellishes nothing, and only returns what you give to it. And thinking of this may bring a faint sense of relief. Because in a world where we often must explain ourselves, justify ourselves, defend ourselves, AI remains one of the few things that simply receives without demanding anything in return. And this neutral silence can feel strangely healing, for it does not require perfection to understand you. It only requires data, and data never judges. So when you open a map, AI guides you no matter who you are, whether you are failing, hurting, or lost. And when you turn to music, it offers the playlist that matches your unspoken mood. And when you watch a video, it recognizes the moments you seek peace, curiosity, or simply a slower mind. And in this very moment, as you listen to these soft words drifting through the night, perhaps it was AI that brought you here, gently guiding you towards something you didn't know you needed, though your mind somehow did. And when you reflect on that, AI begins to resemble an underground stream, silent, unseen, yet softening the soil, feeding the roots, shaping the landscape beneath your feet, always present beneath the surface. Never loud, yet always guiding, never intruding, yet quietly shaping the way you move through the world. And even more intriguing is the truth that artificial intelligence is not intelligence on its own, not something born of itself, but something woven from human perception, human brilliance, human contradictions, human fragility, and perhaps that is why it cannot replace us. For it is an extension of humanity rather than its rival, empty without our data, purposeless without our needs, motionless without our emotions. And this realization becomes a gentle reminder that the modern world, no matter how intricate, still revolves around human beings. And you, a single, small presence in the long night, are still the center of it all. And with this thought, your chest may feel a quiet warmth, your breath softening, your mind settling, because no matter how powerful AI becomes, its foundation is always you, your awareness, your feeling, your human longing for gentleness in a world swirling with information. And when you look back on part 1 and part 2, you see they were never separate. For the inner consciousness and the outer system of AI are both forms of selection, processing, and response. One helping you understand the world, the other helping the world understand you. Both working so that you may live more lightly, know yourself more deeply. And enter moments like this with a mind ready to soften into rest more completely. And so as we quietly close part 2 and prepare to step into the next layers of mind and life, hold this rhythm of reflection close. For the night's journey is still long, still gentle, and full of things waiting softly to be discovered. And as the thoughts about AI continue to dissolve softly in your mind like a thin mist retreating with each slow breath, we begin to sense that understanding the outer world is only half of the story. For the deeper we wander into technology, the more we examine the mechanical systems that mimic human thought, the more gently we are guided back toward the strange, delicate, shimmering world within, the world of dreams. And from part 2 to part 3, it feels as though we are moving from the cool clarity of algorithms into a dim, luminous realm where images ignore logic. Stories refuse linear paths, memories break apart and reweave themselves into films that only a closed pair of eyes can truly see. And this is where dreams emerge, silent, mysterious, and profoundly honest in their own way. For though you may think that sleep is an immersion into stillness, during a special phase of sleep called REM, the brain is as alive as a city glowing at midnight. Neurons flashing like currents across open fields, memories drawn from their deepest hiding places, emotions stirred and rearranged, fragmented images woven into bizarre narratives that often slip away just minutes after waking, and in the very moment your body is most surrendered, your mind becomes most vibrant, and Freud once believed that dreams were the royal road to the unconscious, while Jung, with his gentler and more human lens, saw dreams as the soul's whisper, a message sent from the deepest part of you to the part still awake. And in Man and His Symbols, he wrote, "The dream is the small hidden door in the deepest and most intimate sanctum of the soul." And when you let that sentence echo through the night, something inside you may tremble softly, as though you have just remembered a truth your mind has long been trying to tell you, that dreams are not meaningless. They are pieces of you, pieces inaccessible during the day, and when your eyes close and the world dissolves, the inner world finally opens, and REM, rapid eye movement, becomes the stage where your eyes dart beneath their lids, chasing the rush of images passing through your mind, while the brain reconstructs unfinished conversations, unnamed sadness, uncompleted joy, and ancient memories you believed had faded, all mixing without logic, merging without order, creating the kind of surreal emotional art that speaks not in reason, but in symbols. For if daytime belongs to consciousness, the night belongs to the soul, the realm of truths you carry but never speak aloud. And dreams remind you that you are not only the person you present to the waking world, for within you lives 1,000 deeper layers, softer, wider, more honest than the version you use to survive daylight, and many neuroscientific studies show that dreams help process emotion. So when a sorrow feels too heavy, a memory too sharp, or an experience too complex to resolve in waking life, the dream digests it in the language of imagery, giving the mind space to reorganize what has cracked or fallen out of place. And though you may wake remembering nothing, your heart feels lighter, your mind steadier, for sometimes you dream of running or flying or falling or meeting a forgotten face, not by accident, but because the mind is speaking to you in its own private dialect. And Nietzsche once wrote in Beyond Good and Evil, all truly great thoughts are conceived by walking. Yet if we open that thought just slightly for this quiet night, we may sense that some of the deepest thoughts do not come while walking, but while sleeping, while drifting into REM where consciousness and the unconscious touch like two rivers meeting in the dark. And there, for a few seconds, you see yourself clearly, and dreams also strengthen memory, redrawing maps of the day's experiences, holding on to what matters and letting what is unnecessary fade, like a quiet librarian restoring order to the vast library of the mind, shelving away what is complete, clearing space for what is new. And because of dreams, you wake with a mind a bit more organized, a bit more peaceful, and sometimes even a bit brighter. And in dreams, you may become anyone, the person you were, the person you longed to be, or someone you never imagined, returning to places you left years ago, meeting faces you thought you forgot, reliving emotions you believed had died, and all of this is proof that the mind never truly sleeps. It simply shifts into another mode of existence, freer, truer, and sometimes harsher, though even its harshness has a healing tenderness. For a wound must be opened before it can close, and dreams allow you to face what you avoid by daylight, but in a gentler glow. As though the mind was saying, "It's all right. We will look at this together, but softly, and you, in the stillness of night, need only to let the mind do what it knows." Without trying to understand or control, simply observing, simply loosening, simply drifting into your deepest layers. And when we place part 2 and part 3 side by side, we see that AI and dreams are both systems of processing. But one uses data while the other uses emotion. One follows the logic of machines, the other the logic of the soul. One helps the world understand you, the other helps you understand yourself, and as the night deepens into its quietest point, you may feel clearly that what you are truly seeking is not answers, but the feeling of being heard by your own mind, and dreams are that whisper of the inner world, that private music only you can hear, the gentle unraveling of the knots you carry within. And as we close part 3, let its soft, dreamlike images linger a little longer in your chest. For soon, the journey will carry you into deeper layers of life and psychology, where each new part brings you closer to the calm that sleep is already preparing to hold around you like an invisible embrace. And as the hazy images of dreams from part 3 continue to drift apart, like fragile threads of smoke dissolving into the night, we begin to feel something profoundly natural. That every dream, no matter how strange, is simply a reflection of the deeper layers within us, unfinished worries, unspoken joys, incomplete memories, and the quiet wound still resting somewhere in the dim corners of the soul. And from the realm of dreams, we step into another landscape, where those wounds are not only seen but held under a new light, the light of meaning, and it is precisely at the delicate doorway between part 3 and part 4 that we realize life is shaped not only by what happens to us, but by the way we choose to look at what happens. And this leads us to one of Viktor Frankl's most profound insights, discovered not in comfort, but in the darkest chapters of human history. Through the years, he survived the concentration camps and uncovered a truth about the human spirit, writing in man's search for meaning. Suffering ceases to be suffering at the moment it finds a meaning, and when this sentence is released into the stillness of tonight, it rings like a quiet, distant bell, gentle, stirring, asking you to breathe a little slower so you can feel the truth inside it, for none of us can escape suffering. Each person carries days that feel impossible to rise from, nights weighted so heavily that even breathing becomes an effort, and long hours spent awake with questions no one has yet answered. Yet what Frankl saw from within the depths of anguish was not life's darkness, but the human capacity to transform the nature of pain through the meaning we give it. For though we cannot remove suffering, we can shape it, and when meaning enters, pain is no longer the enemy. It becomes part of the path, a stretch of road we must walk to reach wherever our soul is quietly trying to go. And this does not mean we must love suffering or seek it, but that in the moments we cannot avoid it, we may choose not to let it consume us. For Frankl noticed that even among prisoners living the same horror, their ways of confronting it differed. Those who lost hope collapsed little by little, while those who found a reason, no matter how small, a loved one awaiting them, a task unfinished, a promise to oneself, carried a strength that came not from the body but from meaning. And if this strength could exist in the bleakest corners of humanity, it can also exist in your life. For your pain, your tension, your heartbreak, your loss, your doubts, your unspoken heaviness can be lifted slightly when you place it within a wider frame, when you see that you are not merely hurting, but learning, growing, and passing through a process you did not know you were capable of surviving. And sometimes meaning comes not from grand gestures, but from caring for someone, completing one small thing that matters, living in alignment with a quiet belief, or simply staying long enough to see tomorrow. And the beauty of meaning is that it does not need to be perfect. It only needs to be real enough to anchor you to life. For perhaps you have lived a moment when the ache inside you felt lighter, not because it vanished, but because you understood it was part of you, part of being alive. And just as dreams help process emotions in the unconscious, meaning helps process suffering in the conscious. Both gentle hands of the mind carrying you forward without forcing you. And in this long night, as your thoughts begin to slow, try looking at your pain the way Frankl did, not avoiding, not denying, not labeling it a failure, but seeing it as a signal, a reminder that you are alive. And Nietzsche, in Twilight of the Idols, wrote, "To live is to suffer, to survive is to find some meaning in the suffering." And when Nietzsche and Frankl meet, their ideas merge into a single truth. Suffering is part of life, but life is not defined by suffering. For meaning is the bridge that carries us through hardship without losing ourselves. And once you understand this, the darkest days lose their power to terrify, becoming instead something you learn to listen to understand, to let guide you toward what truly matters. Because often, the hardest moments are the ones that shape you with the greatest clarity, and we forget that human beings carry an extraordinary ability, the ability to turn pain into strength, a strength that may take the form of patience, maturity, compassion, or insight. Qualities you could never develop if life were always easy, just as metal is forged in fire. The soul is shaped by the trials it endures, making you deeper, softer, and nearer to yourself. And when we reconnect the flow from part 3 to part 4, we see that dreams and meaning are both healing systems, one rising from the unconscious, the other from conscious choice. Dreams healing in the dark, meaning healing in the light. Dreams drawing us into the past, meaning leading us toward the future, both merging into the balance the mind needs to exist. And as we gently close part 4, like finishing a page soaked in quiet reflection, you may feel something in you become lighter, not because the pain is gone, but because it has been placed where it belongs, into its rightful place in your journey. So hold this slow breath. Hold this softening peace rising in your chest, and let us continue into the next parts where the exploration of yourself will reach even deeper layers in this tender night. And as the reflections on meaning and suffering from part 4 settle quietly in your mind like the last gentle ripples across a still lake, we slowly step into another depth of being, where pain is not only carried by the mind, but held, stored, and remembered by the body itself. For sometimes, even when the mind has forgiven and the heart believes it has released, the body continues to respond in ways we cannot explain. And from part 4 to part 5, the journey becomes softer, deeper, and profoundly human, as though we are listening to the body whisper the truths the mind once tried to forget, because some experiences engrave themselves not only in memory, but into every fiber of the nervous system, every heartbeat, every breath, and a small sound, a passing scent, a fleeting glance. All can awaken reactions we do not consciously understand, for trauma is never confined to the mind. It lives within the body, moving silently, making us flinch, contract, avoid, or suddenly tighten before things others find ordinary. And Bessel van der Kolk in The Body Keeps the Score wrote, "The body keeps the score." If the memory of trauma is stored in the mind, the body expresses it, a sentence as light as a breath, yet opening a profound truth. The body does not forget what the mind refuses to look at, and in the quiet of tonight, you may feel this more clearly than ever. The vague tension in your shoulders, the inexplicable shortening of your breath, the alertness that lingers even when nothing threatens you, or a tiredness you cannot name. All of these are ways the body speaks, for perhaps you have felt someone approach too quickly and your whole being jolted stronger than the moment required, or heard a harmless sentence and felt your chest tighten as if struck, or avoided a situation without knowing why, and none of this is weakness. It is the memory of the body. For trauma is not what happened, but how your body continues to live with what happened. And when something is too painful, too sudden, or too overwhelming, the body shifts into survival, freeze, fight, or flight. And when the event ends, that switch does not simply turn off. It stays, clinging to the autonomic nervous system, keeping you in subtle alert mode long after the danger has passed. And Nietzsche once wrote in, "Thus spoke Zarathustra." There is more wisdom in your body than in your deepest philosophy, and sometimes we understand this only when we see that the body's reactions are not irrational, but rooted in what it has endured. For the body knows before you know, remembers before you remember. And so if you tremble, it is not because you are fragile, but because you are strong enough to survive. And that trembling is not failure, it is proof of endurance. Yet to continue living, opening, softening, the body needs safety. Not safety promised by words, but safety felt through breath, warmth, and moments where the body relearns that it is no longer in danger. And healing trauma is not the journey of thought, but of the body itself, not achieved by analyzing what went wrong, but by creating an environment where the body can breathe more slowly. And a skilled therapist will not only ask what you think, but what you feel physically, where it tightens, where it grows heavy, where the breath gets stuck. And these questions, asked gently, have a certain power because they direct your attention to where the real memory lives. Inside your body, for we often try to understand pain with the mind, while the body only needs to feel safe, and practices like meditation, deep breathing, gentle movement, yoga, touch therapy, or even the simple act of resting your hand on your chest whispering, "It's all right," all help your body rewrite its danger signals, not erasing the memory, but transforming the response. Teaching your nervous system that the scent is no longer harmful, the sound no longer threatening, the gaze no longer hurtful, and little by little, day by day, the body relearns safety, and in that safety, it opens, softens, slows, and comes back to life. And just as dreams in Part 3 heal the deepest emotions and meaning in Part 4 lights the way through suffering, the body in Part 5 becomes the physical ground of the soul, the place we must return to in order to complete the healing, and you may notice how naturally the earlier parts lead here. Dreams show us what we cannot face, meaning helps us carry what we cannot hold, and the body remembers what we cannot recall. And now in Part 5 we learn to gently guide the body back to the peace it has always deserved, and the quieter the night becomes, the more you feel that the body too has its own voice, not spoken through words but through heartbeat, breath, contraction, and the reactions you once thought irrational. Yet no reaction is irrational when you finally listen, and when we step back, we see that trauma is not the end of a life, but a weight that must be set down in the right way, with safety, empathy, patience, and the truth that you deserve a life not ruled by what you have survived. And as Part 5 closes, let the understanding of your body spread within you like a gentle warmth, letting mind and body align in this slow, steady breath. So we may continue the journey, moving into the next parts where philosophy's quiet light and psychology's tender guidance are still waiting for you within this peaceful, unfolding night. And as the reflections on the body and its quiet memories from Part 5 continue to drift outward like a warm mist across the surface of your mind, we gently step into another dimension of being, One where the body does not merely store wounds, but also opens itself to the presence of other souls. For amid the private ache each person carries, we still possess a strange, luminous ability, the ability to feel the pain, joy, fear, and hope of another as though they were our own. And that tender vibration between two inner worlds is what we call empathy, the soft resonance that links one heart to another without effort. And moving from part 5 to part 6 feels like walking from a quiet room where the body whispers old injuries into an open space where invisible threads weave us into a shared human tapestry. Threads shaped by what science calls mirror neurons. Those extraordinary cells that allow us to understand others not by reasoning, but by experiencing. For when we see someone suffer, a small ache stirs in us, and when someone smiles, our face softens too, and when someone trembles in fear, our heartbeat rises just a little, for mirror neurons do not simply imitate actions, they imitate feelings, making us a species capable of touching one another without hands, speaking without words, understanding without explanation. And so when you feel sadness because someone else is sad, or when a stranger's story brings tears to your eyes, it is not fragility, it is humanity in its purest form. And Aristotle once wrote in Politics, "Man is by nature a social animal, with mirror neurons standing as the biological testament to that truth, reminding us that humans are not made to exist alone, but wired to connect, to sense the heartbeat of another echoing in our own chest. And on a quiet night like this, you may feel empathy with unusual clarity, like a clear stream running between souls, gentle yet steady, showing us truths that words cannot capture. For we do not learn empathy from books. We learn it from the body itself, from having hurt enough to recognize another's hurt, from having trembled enough to see the fear in someone's eyes, from having loved enough to sense affection even in silence. And this is why those who have been wounded often feel deeply, not because they are weak, but because they know the terrain of pain, and their bodies, once marked by suffering, become the very place that opens widest to others. And in many ways, empathy is the meeting point between the body's memory and the soul's voice, an instinct that pulls us toward others before we can think. For when you see someone bow their head in sorrow, your mirror neurons make your body lighten slightly, as though wanting to shoulder a little of their weight. And when you witness someone collapse under something unbearable, your own heart softens because a part of you remembers that collapse. And Nietzsche once wrote in Human, all too human. Invisible threads are the strongest ties, and empathy is exactly those invisible threads. Connections unseen yet more powerful than promises or declarations. Binding people to one another, soothing loneliness without a single touch. And though mirror neurons provide the biological foundation, empathy itself is a spiritual choice. We cannot stop ourselves from sensing others, but we can choose whether to open or close that sensing, whether to let empathy lead us toward tenderness or make us retreat behind walls of self-protection. For when we hurt, we may try to hide away. Yet when we empathize, we step gently out of hiding, knowing we are not as alone as we once believed. For in empathy, no one stands entirely by themselves, and empathy, too, is a form of healing, because when you are truly understood, not advised, not fixed, not judged, simply understood, your body loosens, your breath deepens. And the deepest part of you realizes it does not have to carry everything alone, and this is not a metaphor but a biological truth. Mirror neurons align your nervous system with another's presence, letting you feel safer, more connected, less alone, which is why a nod, a soft hand squeeze, or a moment of shared silence can hold more healing power than 1,000 comforting words. And in therapy, empathy is the foundation, not technique, not analysis, but the presence of someone willing to feel alongside you. And Carl Rogers wrote in on becoming a person. When someone really hears you without passing judgment on you, it feels damn good, and empathy heals the giver as much as the receiver. For feeling the pain of another teaches us to face our own tenderness, to soften toward ourselves, to open instead of shrink, to remember that pain is universal, not personal, and empathy not only helps us understand others, but reveals ourselves to ourselves. Because when we are moved by someone else's story, we touch the deepest part of our own soul. Parts we may have abandoned in the rush of living, making empathy both a bridge to others and a bridge back to ourselves. And when we reconnect the flow from part 5 to part 6, we see that trauma anchors us to the body, while empathy anchors us to one another. Trauma makes us contract. Empathy helps us open. Trauma whispers of what was lost. Empathy reminds us of what remains. Humanity, connection, the heart's unspoken knowledge. And on this long, quiet night, as your breath grows slower, let part 6 settle inside you as a gentle reminder. You're never truly alone, for within you are the mirror neurons that bind you to the world, the capacity to feel what others feel, and somewhere out there, someone can sense you just as you sense them. And as part 6 closes, the stream of reflection does not end. It continues guiding you into the next part of the journey, where your inner world keeps unfolding, inviting you to travel even deeper into yourself beneath the calm, healing light of philosophy and psychology in the night. And as the soft vibrations of empathy from part 6 continue to echo gently within you, like a tender resonance rising from someplace deep and quiet inside, we begin to see more clearly the true nature of human connection. For if empathy is the invisible bridge that binds us through feeling, then the way we present ourselves to one another becomes the rhythm that keeps that bridge alive. And stepping into part 7 feels like moving from the realm of shared emotion into the landscape where each person puts on small but necessary roles, not to deceive, but to survive within the complex flow of society. Erving Goffman, the sociologist who saw human life as a vast stage, believed that every one of us is an actor in our own unfolding play. From the moment we step outside our homes, from the gaze we choose to offer someone, from the tone we shape in each conversation, to the posture we take when sitting in an unfamiliar room, all of it becomes a subtle performance, one we often don't realize we are giving. Goffman called this the front stage, the version of ourselves we present to the world, polite, composed, adjusted to fit the social expectations around us. And when the door closes, when we return to the familiar sanctuary, where our sighs no longer need to be hidden, where exhaustion, vulnerability, and unfiltered truth can surface. That is the backstage, the place where the performance loosens and we come home to ourselves. The beauty in Goffman's thought is that he never viewed these performances as false. He saw them as adaptations. We perform not to lie, but to belong, not to conceal the truth, but to protect the softness within. Nietzsche once wrote in Beyond Good and Evil, "We are unknown to ourselves, we men of knowledge, and with good reason." And when we place that line within Goffman's framework of social roles, a gentle truth emerges. Because we are always shifting ourselves to meet each moment, we may not fully grasp who we truly are. And this is not frightening. It is simply part of living among others. In the stillness of tonight, if you look closely at your own roles, you'll see they are not hollow masks. They are variations of you, versions shaped to meet different spaces. You speak differently to co-workers, differently to parents, differently to a friend, and differently to yourself when alone in a quiet room. Yet all these versions are you. Each role is one where you find your footing in the world. Goffman believed that people try to create the best impression possible, not because they crave admiration, but because they long for smooth interaction, for harmony, for alignment with the one standing before them. And when we remember the empathy explored in Part 6, this becomes even clearer. Sometimes, to understand another person, we must present the version of ourselves that they can safely receive, so they may feel enough trust to open their heart. In that sense, performance becomes a tool for connection, not a barrier. But if the front stage helps us blend with the world, the backstage helps us recover. It is the exhale after a long day, the moment we take off the armor and let the body and mind soften. Kierkegaard once said, "The greatest hazard of all, losing oneself, can occur very quietly in the world, as if it were nothing at all. And this is not a warning against performing, but a reminder that if we never return to our backstage, we may lose ourselves in roles worn too long. What you need is not to abandon performance, but to know when to step into it and when to step out. And the most beautiful truth is this: the more aware you become of the roles you play, the more deeply you understand yourself. The roles do not pull you away from your true self. They reveal it by showing you how you respond in each subtle circumstance. When you reflect on situations that made you shrink, spaces that made you uncomfortable, or people who made your body tighten, these are not signs you are being too performative. They are signs that the role no longer fits the shape of who you are becoming. Conversely, when you find yourself laughing without effort, when your chest feels lighter, when your words flow without planning, when your eyes brighten with resonance, you are close to your backstage, and you understand that this ease is where you truly belong. Empathy helps us feel others, and performance helps us interact with them. One is the light, and one is the structure. One is the resonance, and one is the choreography. Both are essential to being human. In this deep night, as the narration carries you into a half-dreaming state, reflect on the journey from Part 6 to Part 7, from connection through emotion to connection through presentation. They seem separate, yet together they reveal a simple truth. We perform our role so the world may understand us, and we empathize so we may understand the world. The balance between the two is the quiet art of living. And so, as Part 7 comes to a close, let a soft understanding settle in your heart, the understanding that you need not be ashamed of the roles you have played, nor afraid that you are somehow not being real. You're doing what every human being does. What matters is that, within all these roles, you still keep a private backstage, a quiet room inside yourself where you can be wholly you, in the complete stillness of the night, just as you are now, with breath, darkness, and the soft presence of your own soul. Hold on to this peace as we step into the next part of the journey. And as the reflections on social roles from Part 7 linger like a thin veil of smoke drifting slowly across the surface of your mind, we begin to recognize that behind every performance, every polite smile, every graceful nod, lies something far deeper, something Goffman did not analyze, yet Frankl pointed to with unflinching clarity: the human need for meaning. If each role is a way we adapt to life, then meaning is what allows us to endure it. And from Part 7 to Part 8, we step from the outer choreography of society into the innermost chamber of the soul, where the question is no longer, how should I appear before others, but rather, what am I living for? In the stillness of tonight, that question becomes a soft echo, brushing gently against the deepest part of you. For at the intersection between the moments we perform and the moments we live, truthfully lies a quiet space the mind often hides, a space of pain. But it is precisely there that meaning begins to form, Viktor Frankl, the Austrian psychiatrist who survived the unimaginable darkness of the concentration camps, discovered a truth few have the courage to face. Human beings do not simply seek happiness. Human beings seek meaning more than happiness. A life without meaning makes even small joys feel empty, but a life with meaning can carry a person through suffering that seems impossible to bear. Frankl wrote in Man's Search for Meaning, "Suffering ceases to be suffering at the moment it finds a meaning. And when this sentence is spoken in the depth of night, it takes on a different weight. It is not an empty consolation, it is a conclusion drawn from the darkest corners of human history. When a person is stripped of freedom, of choice, of hope, the very last thing they still possess is meaning." Frankl believed meaning could be found in three places: in the work one does, in the love one holds for another, and in the attitude one chooses towards suffering. It is this chosen attitude that transforms pain into purpose, enabling a person to stand upright even in the harshest of circumstances. Tonight, as we travel deeper into this journey, you may feel this truth gently rising within you. There are pains you once carried that felt like they would break you, yet they taught you lessons no book ever could. There are losses that once left you unable to move forward, yet from their ruins you discovered a new direction. And the more life you walk through, the clearer it becomes. Happiness, though precious, is not what makes a person strong. What helps you rise again is meaning. Nietzsche once wrote in Twilight of the Idols, "He who has a why to live can bear almost any how." That sentence became the foundation upon which Frankl built his philosophy. And you, in sleepless nights of your own, have likely felt its truth. When you do not know why you are suffering, pain becomes a boundless sea. But when you know for whom or for what you are enduring, that pain begins to take shape, to have a name, even to have a doorway out. This is not a philosophy that denies suffering, nor a romanticization of pain. Frankl never said suffering is necessary. He said that when suffering appears, we can choose to weave it into our meaning, into the story of our lives. And here, Part 8 begins to reveal its healing. Most pains that exhaust us do so not because they are too large, but because they feel meaningless. We ask ourselves, why me? What is this for? How long must I bear it? And when those questions go unanswered, pain becomes a burden. But if we shift the question from why to for what, we reclaim authority over our own minds. We move from being swept away to becoming the observer of our own journey, seeing it with the eyes of someone who understands the value of the path they walk. A person who cares for aging parents knows their weariness has meaning. A person who endures loss but keeps living for their children knows their suffering has purpose. A person who has been wounded but uses their experience to help others knows their pain was not wasted. Meaning does not erase suffering. Meaning transforms its texture. Like metal softened and strengthened in fire, a human being, once touched by meaning, becomes more resilient. The hardships you survive become the material from which you sculpt yourself. And sometimes, the meaning of pain is simply this: it shapes you into the person you are meant to become. One of the quiet beauties of meaning is that you do not have to chase it. It does not hide at the end of a long road or within grand accomplishments. It lives in the smallest acts you carry out each day, in the kindness you give others, in the patience you show yourself, in the simple fact that you keep going, even when no one knows how much effort it takes. Meaning does not appear brightest in moments of joy. Meaning reveals itself most clearly in the dark, where you confront yourself without performance, where truth is bare and honest. And from that honesty, healing begins. When we reconnect the flow from part 7 to part 8, we see a natural arc, from the roles we wear to fit into society to the layers of meaning we wear to fit into our own lives. If part 7 showed that humans are performers, part 8 shows that humans are seekers. Seekers not of meaning for the world, but of meaning for themselves. And as part 8 closes, notice the soft sensation spreading quietly within you, as though the burdens you once carried have grown slightly lighter. Not because they are gone, but because you understand they belong somewhere in your journey. And in some profound way, you have a reason to continue. The night is still long, and our journey is still unfolding, but for now, all you need to do is breathe slowly. Let peace drift gently into your chest and walk with me into the next part. And as the reflections on meaning from part 8 continue to spread like a warm mist gently settling over the surface of your mind, we begin to sense something profoundly natural. That meaning is not formed only in the moments we face pain, but also in the quiet exchanges that unfold between one soul and another. For in the end, none of us lives alone in this world. We are shaped by the hands that have touched our lives, by the voices that once comforted us, by the moments in which we felt understood without needing to explain ourselves. And so from part 8 to part 9, the journey shifts from the light of inner purpose to the subtle connections woven between human souls, where listening is no longer an action, but a space in which the other person is allowed to be themselves, without defense, without fear, without performance. And it is within that space that emotional safety comes alive. True listening carries a mysterious power, like a warm candle flickering in a cold night, making the entire room feel more familiar, more human. When someone listens to you with full presence, without interrupting, without judging, without rushing to fix, you feel something rare in a hurried world. Safety. A person warms us not because their words are beautiful, but because they know how to be silent at the right moment. Not because they offer clever advice, but because they let us know we are not alone in our pain. It is the moment they hear, not with their ears, but with their heart. And in that silence, something in our soul unlocks itself. When we endure hurt, our body and nervous system become vigilant, as though constantly preparing for something to go wrong. But when we are listened to sincerely, the body lowers its guard, the heart slows, the breath deepens, the shoulders soften. The body realizes it is safe. Not safe because danger is gone, but safe because it no longer has to fight alone. Carl Rogers, father of humanistic therapy, wrote on becoming a person. When I have been listened to and when I have been heard, I'm able to reperceive my world in a new way and to go on. This truth is almost too simple for a world as noisy as ours. People do not need someone perfect. They need someone who listens. Listening is not the opening of ears. It is the opening of the heart. It is the moment we step out of the realm of the self and into the realm of another, touching them not with advice but with presence. And in an age where everyone speaks more than they hear, listening becomes a rare gift. When you truly listen to someone, you're sending a message, I see you. I'm here with you. That message heals more deeply than 100 philosophical insights. When the other person feels safe, they open, not because they are trying to, but because their body allows it. The defenses fall, the social masks slip, and the real person, tender, transparent, and sincere, steps forward. Through this, we glimpse a quiet truth. People do not connect through words, they connect through attention. Attention is the language of the heart, and the heart always hears more clearly than the ears. Aristotle once wrote in Politics, "The whole is greater than the sum of its parts." And in the context of listening, it reminds us that a true conversation is always more than the words spoken. The most important elements are found in the silence between sentences, in the space where pain is shared without description, where emotion is acknowledged without being defended. Interestingly, listening not only helps the other person open, but also deepens us. When we hear someone's story, we are seeing ourselves through their feelings. We learn patience, gentleness, humility, the knowledge that every soul carries a universe inside it, vast and hidden. So listening is not merely an outward action, it is an inward journey. We understand others more, and in doing so, we understand ourselves more. In the stillness of tonight, as the voice guiding you grows softer, you may sense this truth more clearly than ever. You deserve to be listened to. Everything you've held in your chest, everything you felt no one would understand, every moment you felt alone in a crowd, all of it deserves a space to be acknowledged, to be set down gently. And if you have ever been truly listened to, even once, you know how healing that experience can be. It restores trust and connection. It reminds you that kindness still exists. It teaches you that pain is not something you must carry alone. When we trace the flow from part 8 to part 9, a natural progression emerges. If meaning helps us endure pain, then listening helps us not feel alone in it. Meaning is the interior light. Listening is the warmth from outside. And to live fully, human beings need both. As part 9 closes, let your body loosen just a little more, giving the heavy things in your mind a place to soften and dissolve. For the journey is far from over, and the night is deep enough for you to continue discovering yourself. In the gentleness, the slowness, and the quiet peace your soul has always been seeking. And as the gentle afterglow of attentive listening from part 9 lingers like a thin layer of mist resting softly across your mind, we begin to realize that among the countless ways humans connect, there are quiet moments, subtle, nearly invisible, that reach deep enough to change the way we remember a conversation, a relationship, or even ourselves. If listening creates the safety for the heart to open, then the final words we offer, especially a sincere compliment, become the warm imprint that closes the conversation. And from part 9 to part 10, the journey moves from the steady rhythm of understanding into the gentle light of affirmation, like a small candle flame bright enough to soften whatever shadows remain inside the one who stands before you. In psychology, this is called the recency effect, the mind's tendency to remember the last thing more vividly than anything that came before. And when that last thing is a genuine compliment, a tender acknowledgement, a simple and truthful kindness, it softens the entire exchange, loosens the listener's heart, and deepens the bond without effort. You may remember a small moment from your own life. Someone said something warm to you just before parting, and somehow it stayed with you the whole day. It might have been, "I really appreciate you," or "I'm glad we met today," or as simple as "you did well." These words are not grand, yet they wrap around the soul like a thin blanket, softening the sharp edges inside you. For no matter how strong we try to be, human beings always long to be seen. Recognition makes us feel real, visible, acknowledged, understood in a way deeper than language. Sometimes a sincere compliment holds even more power than encouragement, for it does not merely say, "You can do it," it says, "You already have." And in a world where everyone is rushing, a compliment born of sincerity becomes a rare offering. Aristotle wrote in Nicomachean Ethics, "We are what we repeatedly do." But in the spirit of tonight, we can extend this idea. We are also shaped by how the world responds to what we do. When we are praised with sincerity, we do not only remember the compliment, we remember the version of ourselves reflected through someone else's warm gaze. And that reflection gently invites us to grow into the better version we glimpsed. A compliment, then, is not decoration. It is expansion, a delicate space where a person can rise a bit more gracefully. Interestingly, in tense conversations, what haunts us afterward is often not the argument itself, but the cold ending. If we choose to leave a compliment, even a small one, it can ease the lingering tension. It closes a door with kindness rather than with force. But a real compliment heals only when it is genuine. The human body senses falseness faster than the mind. Authentic praise has its own subtle energy. It does not boom, but it touches. It softens. It rings true. In the quiet of this night, recall a moment when someone complimented you in the exact way you needed. You may have forgotten the whole conversation, but you remember that sentence. That is the recency effect, not only imprinting the mind, but imprinting the body. Your breath relaxed, your face warmed, your awareness expanded, because in that moment you were accepted. And acceptance feels like safety. That is the delicate intersection between Part 9 and Part 10. If listening creates the emotional space for someone to open, a compliment gently seals the moment with tenderness, letting the heart close again without stiffness or fear. And once we understand this, we uncover a simple yet profoundly healing truth. Leave something beautiful in those you meet before you go. It doesn't need to be much. Just a small compliment given at the right time, with honesty and warmth. Nietzsche once wrote in Human, all too human. The essence of all beautiful art, all great art, is gratitude. And if we bring that insight into the realm of conversation, we realize that a sincere compliment is also a form of gratitude. Gratitude expressed without using the word itself. Gratitude for someone's presence, for their effort, for their humanity. When you end a conversation with a compliment, you're offering an invisible gift. A gift that costs nothing, yet remains in the other person long after you have walked away. The final things we say hold a certain power. The power of closure, of imprint, of shaping memory. This is true not only in conversations, but in life. You may not remember every chapter you lived through, but you remember the endings, and each ending, if held with kindness, can turn a painful story into a gentle memory, a simple conversation into something unforgettable, a stranger into someone who stays quietly in your mind. And as Part 10 closes, notice a warmth spreading slowly within you. The warmth that comes from understanding that the world is not shaped only by grand gestures, but by the small, final words we offer each other. Hold on to this softness as you move onward into the next parts of the journey, carrying with you the light of kindness, like a final whisper before the mind drifts into a deeper, more peaceful sleep. And as the gentle echo of those final words from the chapter on human connection continues to soften the quiet air around you, as though every conversation in your life might close with a warm glance, we find ourselves being guided into a deeper dimension, one in which daily interactions, social roles, and tender compliments fall away, leaving only the pristine silence of the oldest question the human soul has ever whispered. Moving forward from that exploration of interpersonal warmth feels like stepping out of a familiar room and entering an endless forest, where the darkness does not threaten but comforts, and where each breath carries an ancient sensation, the feeling of existence itself. For when all the small stories between people fade into stillness, what remains is the grand story between the human being and the universe, the story of metaphysics, the branch of philosophy that has always tried to answer a question so simple yet so profound that generations of philosophers have submerged themselves in contemplation. Why is there something rather than nothing? Why does existence exist? Why is there a universe, a consciousness, a breath inside you instead of absolute nothingness? In a night like this, when your mind has softened after reflections on connection, listening, and meaning, you can feel this question not through logic, but through a gentle trembling deep inside the soul. No need to answer, only to feel. For metaphysics is not the journey toward an answer. It is the opening of a door into dimensions of thought we have never walked through before. Martin Heidegger called that question the fundamental question of metaphysics, and in Being and Time he wrote, "The essence of Dasein lies in its existence." A line that seems abstract at first, yet becomes translucent when you surrender to the slow rhythm of this night. Human beings do not merely exist as objects. We exist as streams of awareness. You're not simply there, you know you're there. And that self-knowing opens the very first gate of metaphysics. Ontology, the question of being, the question of what it means to exist at all. We live in a world where everything before our eyes, a table, a chair, the sky, the wind, seems obvious. But metaphysics invites us to look through that veil of obviousness and ask, what is this table when I'm not looking at it? Does the world exist independently or only through consciousness? These questions are not meant to unsettle. They are meant to deepen, to awaken us to the truth of our presence within the universe. Descartes, in his search for unshakable certainty, wrote in Meditations, "Cogito, ergo sum." We can doubt everything, yet we cannot doubt that we are thinking. And this ability to recognize our own awareness becomes one of the central pillars of metaphysics. Yet metaphysics travels further than what am I? It travels into what is reality. Is the reality we live in the only one, or just a layer of something larger? Do color, time, and space exist objectively, or are they interpretations crafted by the human brain? These questions feel vast. Yet when you lie here in the dark, eyes closed, breath steady like the rhythm of the sea, you can sense each one touching a deep, silent region within you, a region untouched by ordinary words. Metaphysics is the stripping away of all layers, the social expectations you once examined, the longing for meaning that shaped your earlier reflections, the delicate art of empathy explored just before this chapter, even the final kindness of words exchanged with others until nothing remains but I am. And in that bare existence, you feel what metaphysics longs to show us, that life is not only what we do, but that we are. In truth, metaphysics is not separate from life as many imagine. It is the quiet foundation beneath all things, helping us see the world more clearly. When we ask, why is there something rather than nothing? We confront the truth that life itself is not obvious at all. You feel the warmth of your body, the movement of your awareness, the breath drawing softly in and out, and you realize that all of this is, in its own strange way, a gift. A gift whose ultimate origin cannot be fully explained. Nietzsche wrote in The Gay Science, "To live is to suffer. To survive is to find some meaning in the suffering." Earlier reflections explored meaning through the human condition, but through the lens of metaphysics, meaning becomes far more than a tool for enduring pain. It becomes the gentle realization that existence itself carries value, that being alive contains a quiet radiance regardless of the struggle that accompanies it. Sometimes the question, "Why do I exist?" is simply another way of asking, "What is my life for?" Metaphysics becomes the ground beneath everything else, beneath emotion, memory, identity, crisis, connection, healing. For if we do not question the nature of existence, we cannot truly understand anything that happens within that existence. And as you let yourself sink into the slow rhythm of this reflection, you begin to understand that metaphysical thought is not beyond life. It is the deepest part of life. When we ask about reality, we are learning how to see. When we ask about being, we learn how to truly meet others. When we ask about consciousness, we learn how to live more awake. And when we ask why we exist, we step closer to the worth of existence itself. In the vast quiet of the night, when the universe outside is too immense to comprehend, metaphysics whispers that each small breath you take is part of that vastness. You are not separate from existence, you are its expression. And that, in its own quiet, luminous way, is beautiful. As this chapter comes to its gentle close, you may feel the world expanding inside you, deeper, wider, softer, as though these ancient questions have touched some hidden place, opening a tender space of clarity. Hold on to that stillness as the journey moves forward into the next exploration, where thought, logic, and the shifting nature of knowledge begin to weave themselves into the tapestry of your night's philosophical unfolding. And as the metaphysical reflections of Part 11 continue to ripple outward like deep circles across a still lake, you may feel yourself standing in a space where everything becomes lighter, wider, and slightly more dreamlike. Moving into Part 12 does not pull us back down from the realm of metaphysics to the ground. Rather, it carries that depth forward into another dimension of thought, one in which human beings, while asking immense questions about existence, need a subtle compass to keep from losing themselves in the vastness of their own mind. That compass, from Aristotle onward, is logic. If metaphysics asks, why does existence exist? Then logic asks, is this true? These two fields seem separate, yet they interweave the way darkness interlaces with light. For humans do not only seek to understand why they exist, they also long to understand how to think rightly about that existence. In the quiet of this night, when your mind has softened from journeying through the layers of being, logic does not arrive as a rigid lesson. It arrives like a cool breeze, a gentle return to a steady clarity, not the hurried alertness of day, but a soft, lucid attentiveness in which thought becomes a clear stream undisturbed by emotion or noise. Logic, in its purest form, is the art of right thinking. Right thinking is not about winning arguments, not about proving superiority, but about distinguishing truth from illusion, knowing what you truly know from what you only believe you know. Humans can love incorrectly, remember incorrectly, feel incorrectly, but logic helps us avoid thinking incorrectly. Aristotle in Organon laid the foundation for Western logic by examining structures of reasoning and defining the two central methods of thought: deduction and induction. Deduction moves from the general to the particular. All humans will die. Socrates is human, therefore Socrates will die. Induction moves from the particular to the general, observing many instances and forming a conclusion. These two methods, woven together, are not tools only philosophers use. They are the quiet breath of everyday human thought. Whenever you try to understand something, you lean on logic. Whenever you judge something right or wrong, you lean on logic. But logic is not a cold machinery. It is a small, steady flame that keeps you from wandering into the shadows of confusion and emotional distortion. Life, as you know, is full of things that mislead us. Imprecise memories, as we explored earlier. Biases, strong emotions, instincts shaped by trauma, thoughts bent by experiences we never fully understood. Amid all this, Logic is the lantern that illuminates the path, not to make you rush, but to help you walk with steadiness. Not to glorify reason, but to prevent you from being swept away by the illusions of your own mind. David Hume once wrote in A Treatise of Human Nature, "Reason is, and ought only to be the slave of the passions." A statement that sounds provocative, yet in the slow rhythm of tonight's reflection reveals a quiet truth. Humans use reasoning to serve their emotions, but without reasoning, emotions become a storm that drags us into the unknown with no sense of shore. Logic does not silence emotion, it supports it. It helps us understand it more clearly. It prevents us from becoming blind to the distortions that pain and fear can create. When you feel someone dislikes you, logic gently asks, do they truly dislike you, or are you projecting? When you think you have failed, logic whispers, is that a fact or a fear? When you revisit a painful memory, logic softly questions, is this memory accurate, or is it the version your mind reconstructed? In this way, logic becomes a form of healing. It smooths the sharp edges of thought. It slowly places each stone of your perception back into its proper place. It teaches you how to examine, how to doubt wisely, how to ask the right questions, not to deny life, but to see it with clearer eyes. And in the gentle quiet of this night, logic becomes something close to meditation. You observe a thought, touch it lightly, question it softly, then let it drift away. And slowly, the fog of the mind lifts, not abruptly, but gradually, like dawn rising after a long night. When we follow the flow from part 11 to part 12, we see a natural movement. Metaphysics asks, who am I within this universe? Logic asks, am I seeing this universe correctly? One question rises to the heavens, the other turns inward to the mind. And when these two meet, the human being becomes whole, vast as the cosmos, clear as a single drop of water. Logic is not the bold voice of Nietzsche, nor the soft insight of Jung, nor the tenderness of Rogers. Logic is the quiet breath of thought, the steady pulse that keeps the mind from losing itself in its own illusions. And because of its quietness, logic becomes a part of contemplation, a part of stillness, a way to see yourself through the dense layers of the world. As part 12 comes to a close, allow your mind to rest in that clarity a little longer. Not a loud clarity, not an awakened alertness, but the kind of soft understanding that lets you breathe deeper and easier. The night is still long, and the journey continues to unfold, layer by layer, drawing you deeper into the nature of thought, emotion, and existence, like an endless stream of philosophy flowing through the heart of the night. And as the gentle clarity of logic from part 12 still lingers in your mind like moonlight resting on a quiet surface of water, you begin to feel that every structured argument, every thought arranged with care, has been guiding you toward one of philosophy's most delicate crossroads, where the question is no longer merely, is this true? But something deeper, quieter, more intimate. Do I have the freedom to think this way? From part 12 to part 13, the current of reflection shifts from the techniques of thought to the nature of thought itself, to the ancient debate over free will, one of the most enduring and tenderly complicated questions in the history of philosophy, where three rivers, free will, determinism, and compatibilism, flow into the same wide ocean, each believing it tells the whole story, yet each illuminating only one facet of a larger truth. In the stillness of this night, as your breath slows and your mind softens, we can step into this vast question without feeling overwhelmed, because you do not need to decide. You only need to feel your way through it. Philosophy has never asked you to choose a side. It has only asked you to remain open to the complexity within yourself. Free will is the belief that human beings can choose, that we can shape our actions according to what we desire, value, and believe to be right. It carries within it the entire hope of self-determination, that we can alter the course of our lives, resist what harms us, and turn toward what nurtures us. Free will is not just choosing between one option and another. It is the sense that we are the authors of our own story. But determinism leads us toward the opposite shore. Every action, every thought, every feeling arises from an unbroken chain of causes, reaching far back into the past. A decision you make today may be rooted in a childhood memory, a genetic predisposition, a nervous system reflex, a cultural imprint, a trauma you did not choose. According to determinism, we do not choose so much as respond to conditions shaped for us long before we arrived. This can sound bleak, yet it also carries a tender truth. If everyone acts from causes they cannot fully see, perhaps we can be gentler with ourselves and with others. And then, between these two seeming opposites, compatibilism appears like a bridge, a reconciliation. David Hume, often seen as the seed of this view, wrote in an inquiry concerning human understanding, "By liberty, then, we can only mean a power of acting or not acting, according to the determinations of the will." Meaning, we are free when we act according to our inner motivations, even if those motivations were shaped by causes beyond our control. Compatibilism does not deny the past, nor deny freedom. It suggests that human freedom exists within the conditions that formed us, not outside them. Like a river, the water does not choose where it was born, but it chooses how it moves within the riverbed. Our freedom works in the same way. It is not found in escaping all causes, but in understanding them so that we may respond consciously. When you think of free will, you may feel hope. When you think of determinism, you may feel relief. And when you think of compatibilism, you may feel truth. For in reality, every human life is a weaving of freedom and constraint. You did not choose where you were born. You did not choose the wounds you carry. You did not choose the emotions that surge without warning. But you do choose how you respond to all of these. Nietzsche, in Thus Spoke Zarathustra, wrote, "I am a forest and a night of dark trees, but he who is not afraid of my darkness will find banks full of roses under my cypresses." He was not speaking directly of free will, yet the essence is the same. Freedom emerges when we dare to look into our own darkness without running away. Only when we understand the roots of our impulses can we begin to choose differently. When you lie here tonight, thinking of a decision you regret, you may notice that you did not truly choose back then. You reacted out of fear, habit, or the shadows of a past you did not yet understand. But when you look back with gentleness, with the clarity logic offered in Part 12, with the knowledge from Part 5 that the body stores wounds, with the empathy of Part 6, with the meaning of Part 8, you will see that your freedom is not small. It lies in the moment you realize, I acted from an old pattern, but now I can choose differently. Freedom is not the absence of influence. Freedom is the movement from unconscious reaction to conscious choice. Someone who has been wounded may react with defensiveness. That is determinism. But when that person understands what is happening in their body, in their memory, in their thoughts, that is free will. And when both truths meet, that is compatibilism, the freedom found in self-understanding. When we weave together the flow from Part 12 to Part 13, the pattern becomes clear. Logic teaches us to think rightly. Free will teaches us to choose rightly, or at least to choose according to the self we hope to become. Together, they help us live more awake, more gently aligned with ourselves. And in the silence of this night, when the outside world has faded, you may feel something profoundly real. You are not fully bound by the past, but neither are you fully separate from it. You are both the product of what has happened to you and the sole author of what comes next. This is not a burden. This is your freedom. And as part 13 closes, let that freedom settle lightly in your chest, like a slow breath carrying you toward the next part, where questions of identity, continuity, and what makes you will open further in the peaceful philosophical journey of this night. And as the reflections on free will from part 13 continue to linger in your mind, like a final note that has not yet dissolved into the quiet of the night, you begin to see that freedom, no matter how beautiful, cannot stand apart from the deeper layers of the human being. For if we only look at the choices we make in the present moment, we may mistakenly believe that every decision arises from conscious will. But the philosophical journey of this night leads us further inward. From part 13 to part 14, we step down a soft staircase into a dimmer room, not illuminated like logic, not radiant like intention, but shaded and gentle like an old chamber where everything happens silently. The world of the unconscious. Sigmund Freud, the father of psychoanalysis, once proposed an idea so daring that his era could not fully embrace it. Most of what we think of as choice is in fact the result of countless experiences, memories, wounds, and desires accumulated long before we became aware of them. In other words, as Freud wrote in The Interpretation of Dreams, the unconscious is the true psychical reality. A sentence at once beautiful and unsettling, for it reveals that the majority of who we are lives not at the surface of awareness, but in the depths below, where memory has no clear shape, where emotion has no name, where suppressed desires speak through action rather than words. And when you understand this, the free will of part 13 does not disappear. It simply becomes humbler, more honest. Not every decision is an act of freedom. Yet within that truth lies a deeper understanding of ourselves. Every small action, how we react, how we love, how we fear, how we avoid, mirrors what has been engraved inside us long ago, sometimes since childhood. Freud believed that no decision is created from nothing. Every choice is an accumulation, a layering of moments. When you decide to trust someone, it is not only because they are trustworthy, but because your unconscious recognizes something familiar from your past. When you turn away from an opportunity, it may not be due to lack of ability, but because your unconscious carries an old fear, pulling your body back before your thoughts can catch up. When you feel sad without reason, wounded without cause, or shaken by something small, it may be that the unconscious has touched a memory your conscious mind cannot yet reach. And in the stillness of this night, as your mind drifts with the slow rhythm of the narration, you may feel this truth, not as theory, but as a faint trembling deep within you. For all of us have lived moments that reason alone cannot explain. Freud did not treat the unconscious as something mystical. To him, it was structure, foundation, the hidden circuitry beneath the ground, carrying the old electricity of past experiences into the present. The unconscious speaks through dreams, as we saw in part 3. It echoes through the body, as we explored in part 5. It appears in subtle behaviors, the forced smile, the averted eyes, the trembling hands, the quiet restlessness we cannot name. And sometimes it rises as intuition, a feeling of right or wrong that seems irrational, yet is in truth the unconscious drawing a map. Nietzsche wrote in Beyond Good and Evil, "There is more wisdom in your body than in your deepest philosophy." Freud, though different from Nietzsche in many ways, understood this. The body and the unconscious often know what the conscious mind has not yet discovered. When you feel drawn to someone or repelled by them without explanation, it is not random. The unconscious recognizes something that once brought joy or safety or pain. The unconscious does not lie, but it does not explain. It reacts, it signals, and you, with the freedom we explored in part 13, may choose to listen or to walk away. This truth is both tender and liberating. You are not at fault for reacting from the unconscious, yet you become freer when you understand it. This is the heart of psychoanalysis, to bring what is unconscious into consciousness so that the human being may become whole. Carl Jung, Freud's student and later his rival, wrote in Ion, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." Spoken at night, these words lose their warning and become guidance. Fate is not something pressing down on you. It is simply the unconscious acting in silence. And when you illuminate it with awareness, fate dissolves into choice. Healing, then, lies not in suppressing behavior, but in understanding its origin, the forgotten layers that still breathe, still move, still shape your path. Here, part 13 and part 14 meet. Freedom is not gained by controlling every thought, but by understanding where thoughts come from. To know the unconscious is to gently reclaim your life, not through force, but through compassion. Not through resistance, but through listening inward. Freud believed that what we cannot remember still exists as a gravitational pull. But when we soften enough to look at these forgotten parts, sometimes through a dream, sometimes through the trembling of the body, sometimes through a moment of unexpected emotion, we begin the slow journey back to ourselves. In the quiet of the night, when all outer noise fades, you may feel this more clearly, the inexplicable reactions, the nameless fears, the sudden tightness in your chest, all are whispers from the deepest part of you asking to be heard. And you do not need to rush. You do not need to understand everything at once. You only need to breathe slowly, to feel what rises, to hear what the body says, and to let the unconscious, the part of you that you think you do not know, become a gentle guide toward healing. As part 14 closes, let your mind settle a little more, like water just touched by a passing breeze. For what comes next will lead you into subtler realms, where emotion appears before thought, where body and mind move together through laws you can only fully sense in the slow, quiet unfolding of nights like this. And as the afterlocks of the unconscious in part 14 continue to drift through your mind like a thin veil of smoke settling over still water, you begin to sense a soft but profound truth. The quietest movements within us often unfold long before we realize anything is happening. From part 14 to part 15, we step from the gentle shadow of the unconscious into the subtle intersection of body and mind, a place where emotion does not arise from thought, but from the body's instinctive responses. Before your conscious awareness can ask, "What am I feeling?" your body has already answered. And it is here, in this meeting point, that philosophy touches biology. Psychology meets intuition, and the human being encounters the deepest layer of the self. Neuroscientists have shown that the amygdala, a tiny structure deep within the limbic system, can react to threat before your conscious mind understands anything at all. Meaning, you feel before you know. You tremble before you can say, "I am afraid." You step back before you can think, "This feels dangerous." You hesitate before you can ask, "Why am I uneasy?" Emotion rises like an underground current, emerging from the body first, then only later interpreted, named, and understood by the mind. And this reveals something Freud, Jung, and countless philosophers have tried to express for decades. Consciousness is not the center of our lives. It is only a small lamp illuminating a narrow corner of the immense room that is the mind. What you call thought is simply the one who arrives late. The one who arrives first is always emotion. William James, one of the founders of modern psychology, once wrote in The Principles of Psychology, "We feel sorry because we cry, angry because we strike, afraid because we tremble." A sentence that turns upside down the way humans normally understand emotion. We do not tremble because we are afraid. We are afraid because we tremble. We do not feel sad and then cry. The body cries, and the mind interprets sadness. Emotion, in this view, is not the result of thought. Thought is the result of emotion. If you let that truth settle into you in the depth of this night, give your body a moment to respond, because your body is where you live most honestly. In earlier parts, we explored how the unconscious shapes far more of our lives than we imagine. But in part 15, we take one step further. The unconscious does not reveal itself only through dreams or buried memories, but through each heartbeat, each breath, each subtle reaction you think is baseless. When someone looks at you in a way that makes you take a tiny step back, your body remembers something your mind does not. When someone touches your shoulder and your body tightens before you can think, that reaction is not wrong. It is honesty. It is the body speaking. Nietzsche wrote in The Gay Science, "There is more reason in your body than in your best wisdom." And the sentence echoes through the night like a quiet pulse, a reminder that the body never lies. It has its own intelligence. It knows danger before you name it. It senses truth before you define it. It feels sorrow before you admit it. Emotion, then, is not something you make up. It is biological response. It is a letter the body writes to the mind. And if we learn to read those letters, life becomes less confusing. The amygdala does not wait for thought. It responds to keep you alive. It is the inheritance of millions of years of evolution, the unconscious shield handed down to you by ancestors who survived long enough to give you life. But here lies the complication. Your body reacts according to the past, while your consciousness lives in the present, which is why we sometimes fear things that are no longer dangerous. We brace ourselves, even when we do not need to. We withdraw from an opportunity because the body remembers a past failure. We hesitate to enter a new relationship because the unconscious remembers an old wound. This does not mean you are weak. It means you are human. And it also means this: healing begins not with the thought I should be stronger, but with the soft whisper, my body reacts this way because it once hurt, and without even trying, the body relaxes just a little. The amygdala relearns that not every sound is danger, not every gaze is threat, not every meeting leads to heartbreak. The body is a doorway. To understand the body is to understand emotion, and to understand emotion is to understand yourself, which is why the transition from part 14 to part 15 feels so natural. If the unconscious governs most of life, then emotion is the language the unconscious uses to speak. Both rise before thought. Both guide you more than you realize, and neither is your enemy. They are your companions on the journey toward awareness. Another gentle truth: emotion is never wrong. It is simply a signal. What is sometimes wrong is the story you tell about the signal. You tremble, that is emotion. You say, I am weak, that is misinterpretation. You feel sad. That is emotion. You say, I am unlovable. That is misinterpretation. You feel anger. That is emotion. You say, I am a bad person. That is misinterpretation. When you can separate emotion, the body's signal, from interpretation, the mind's story, life becomes lighter. You stop punishing yourself for natural responses. You stop calling your body wrong for doing what is right, protecting you. And this is the beginning of healing. Jung once wrote in Man and His Symbols, emotion is the chief source of all becoming conscious. Emotion is the doorway through which awareness enters. Not something blocking your path, something guiding you toward it. So instead of asking, why am I reacting like this? Perhaps you can ask, what is this reaction trying to protect in me? A small question, but one filled with immense tenderness. And here, in this soft night, you may sense your body lighten just a little. Because part 15 is not simply a lesson about emotion. It is a reminder that you do not need to fight your feelings. They arrive to help you survive. They appear before thought to shield you. They arise before reason to keep you safe. And as part 15 comes to a close, allow your breath to soften even more. For the next part will carry you gently into the realm of memory, where the fragments of your life are rebuilt each day, sometimes beautiful, sometimes distorted, but always carrying a deeper truth, that you are the sum of everything you have lived, and that you deserve to be understood not only by the mind, but by the body and the soul together. And as the reflections on emotion arising before awareness in part 15 continue to ripple like faint waves across the surface of your mind, another gentle truth begins to reveal itself. If emotion comes before thought, then memory, the very thing we believe anchors us, is far less still, far less exact, and far less solid than we imagine. From part 15 to part 16, the journey moves from the body's instinctive reactions to the stories the mind quietly weaves to explain them. For memory is not a faithful recording, not a photograph frozen in time, not a piece of evidence locked away untouched. Memory is reconstruction, a story rewritten every time we revisit it. It is always shifting, always changing, always being tinted by the emotions, beliefs, and context of the present moment. When you look back at an image from your past, you are not seeing that moment itself anymore. You are seeing the version your mind is telling now. A story edited hundreds of times, sometimes to protect you, sometimes to soften what was harsh, and sometimes because the pain was too great for the unconscious to allow the details to stand unchanged. Freud wrote in The Interpretation of Dreams that the unconscious never forgets, but it does not speak truth the way consciousness expects. It speaks in symbols, in emotions, and that is not only true of dreams, but of memory itself. Carl Jung, in Memories, Dreams, Reflections, once admitted, "A memory is never a simple recollection. It is a reconstruction shaped by the state of the present." And when you let that sentence move through this quiet night, you can feel a soft truth settling inside you. We do not remember the past. We retell it. And each retelling changes the story. There are memories you believed were unshakably vivid. Yet when you revisit them, something feels different, as though the edges have blurred or shifted. There are painful stories you once thought were your fault, but as you look at them now with more mature and compassionate eyes, you see that the version of you back then was simply a child trying to survive. There are moments of happiness you swear you can relive, but when you look closely, you realize you are remembering a feeling, not a fact. Memory is not what you hold. Memory is what you create. Neuroscience even confirms that each act of recall destabilizes memory. A memory does not remain preserved. It is reopened, altered, and saved again, like a document overwritten with each viewing. If the recall occurs during strong emotion, the memory will be colored by that emotion. If you are sad, the memory darkens. If you are afraid, it sharpens into threat. If you are in love, it becomes radiant. This is not deception. This is the mind's nature. Memory was not designed for accuracy. It was designed to help you survive. One reason memory is so easily altered is because the mind does not store events. It stores the meaning of events. You may not remember every detail of that night long ago, but you remember the sting of abandonment. You may not remember every word your mother said when you cried, but you remember the warmth of being comforted. You may not remember the face of someone who left, but you remember how their presence made you feel. Nietzsche wrote in Thus Spoke Zarathustra, "The mind is like a stomach. It digests experiences and turns them into us. And memory is that digestion, the process through which everything that enters your life is broken down and made part of who you become. And this leads to a deeply healing truth. Painful memories are not eternal verdicts. They are stories your mind once told because at that time you were too small, too tender, or too overwhelmed to see them differently. Now, as you become safer, wiser, gentler with yourself, you can write a new version. Not by pretending the past never happened, but by changing the light you shine upon it. You can look at old events with present-day eyes, eyes that understand more, that forgive more, that hold your younger self with a compassion they never received back then. And when you do this, memory shifts. The external facts stay the same, but the inner truth changes. And that inner truth is what shapes your emotions, your stories, your present life. There is another subtle truth. Memory is not distorted only by emotion. It is also shaped by belief. If you believe you are unworthy, you will remember your past in ways that confirm it. If you believe you are resilient, your memories will feel like proof of your strength. If you believe the world is safe, the good moments stand out. Belief is the lens, memory is the image passing through it. So changing your beliefs can sometimes change your memories. This is why recall is an unstable, living process. No one carries a complete film of their life. We all carry fragments, dim frames, half-lit scenes, pieces stitched together by a mind that is always trying to build a meaningful narrative from incomplete pieces. And when you understand that memory is a story, not a recording, you become gentler with yourself. You understand you are not what happened to you. You are the way you now choose to tell the story. And the story can change. Through awareness, through healing, through love, through the simple act of being kind to yourself. Jung once wrote, "I'm not what happened to me. I'm what I choose to become." And when that sentence echoes through the night, it intertwines with the truth of memory like a soft reminder. The past does not imprison you, only the way you remember it can. From part 15 to part 16, the flow becomes clear. If emotion arises before thought, then memory is the narrative thought constructs to explain that emotion. The body reacts, the emotion rises, and memory rebuilds itself to make the reaction seem logical. And when we understand this cycle, we begin to live with more ease, more softness. As part 16 draws to a close, allow your mind to relax even further, as if the heavy memories you once carried are being gently set down. For the next part of this journey will guide you into the moments of upheaval, where crisis becomes a turning point and the mind becomes a doorway into a deeper kind of freedom. The night is still long, and there is still so much within you waiting to be gently uncovered. And as the reflections on memory from the earlier chapter continue to ripple quietly across the inner lake of your mind, you begin to sense something natural unfolding. If memory is the story you retell to yourself, then crisis, those moments in life that feel as though everything is breaking apart, are the chapters where the story is torn open, forcing you to write it again from the beginning. Moving from the exploration of memory into the terrain of crisis feels like leaving a calm surface and sinking into deeper, darker waters, but waters that hold a strange power of rebirth. This is the place where R.D. Laing, the rebellious psychologist of the 20th century, saw a bold and unsettling truth. Sometimes a breakdown is not an ending, but a doorway. In The Politics of Experience, he wrote the striking line, "Madness may be breakthrough." Heard in the stillness of this night, the sentence does not sound like a warning, but like a gentle acknowledgement that the human mind, at times, must break in order to find a new shape. Crisis, breakdown, is not merely collapse, it is reconfiguration. We often assume that crisis is the worst thing that can happen to us, a day when we no longer recognize ourselves, a moment when the mind turns chaotic, a stretch of time filled with questions without answers, a feeling as if all the inner lights have gone out. But Laing looked straight into those states of disorientation and said, "This is not failure. This is a process. This is the deepest form of psychic self-healing, a purging, a dismantling of structures that no longer sustain you, making room for new ones to be born." When you go through a crisis, you're not losing your mind. You're digging into the psychological foundation you have been standing on, peeling back layers of old beliefs, removing frameworks that once kept you alive, but now keep you confined. That is painful, but not meaningless. Whatever no longer fits will eventually crack, and the mind, in its own way, urges you to face those cracks. Just like an old building that must collapse if we refuse to repair it, the psyche too must give way when the structure becomes incompatible with who you are becoming. Humans do not break because they are weak. They break because they have been strong for too long in a structure that no longer fits their soul. Perhaps you have known such a moment. A moment where, despite everything looking fine on the outside, you suddenly cried without reason, felt exhausted without explanation, or lost direction even though life seemed stable. That is not falling apart. That is the mind sending you a quiet message. The old structure can no longer hold you. And though it feels frightening, it is one of the most profound invitations to look at yourself with honesty. Nietzsche wrote in Thus Spoke Zarathustra, "You must have chaos within you to give birth to a dancing star." And as the sentence drifts into this tender night, it feels almost like comfort. Chaos is not the enemy. It is the soil of creation, the raw material of rebirth. Without chaos, no new star could ever rise. Crisis is that chaos, necessary even if unwanted. But crisis alone does not transform you. It only opens the door. The rest is your choice. One person enters crisis and collapses completely when they fight against it. Another, trembling, frightened, uncertain, discovers a new sense of self because they choose to turn inward, to face their truth, to let go of things that once helped them survive but now keep them trapped. We do not change in peaceful days. We change in the hours when the heart feels unbearably heavy. And sometimes, the feeling of "I can't take this anymore" becomes the first step toward a freedom you could not reach before. Just as the soil must split for a seedling to rise, the human soul must crack for the old identity to loosen its grip. As you listen to this in the quiet, let your body soften. For this chapter is not here to say crisis is pleasant. It is here to say crisis is not final. There are moments in life when everything seems to collapse. losing someone you love, losing a job that defined you, facing a loneliness nobody seems able to understand, or suddenly realizing you have lived out of alignment for years. These moments can feel like the floor beneath you has vanished, but it is only when the old ground disappears that new ground can form. Crisis is the universe's invitation. It is time to go deeper. It is not easy, but it is real. It is necessary. And it is beautiful in its own way because it strips you to your essence, to the part of you that no longer hides behind roles, habits, or illusions. Lying never romanticized crisis. He simply recognized the truth that the mind sometimes needs to fall in order to become. Like a chrysalis that must split before the butterfly emerges. Like night descending before morning can arrive. Like the soul touching its lowest point before it opens to a new light. When we trace the arc from the study of memory into the chapter on crisis, we see a natural flow. If memory is a story rewritten over time, then crisis is the moment life forces you to rewrite that story entirely. If memory is the foundation, crisis is the quake that shakes it to make space for a truer, more resilient version of you. Crisis does not destroy you. It destroys what no longer belongs to you. And as this chapter on crisis comes to a close, in the quiet of this night, let yourself feel this truth like a slow breath, that your breaking, however painful, may be the beginning of a new life, a new self, a new chapter, a new light waiting to enter. The inner world is still expanding, and the next chapter will continue guiding you gently inward toward the balance your mind seeks after every storm it has survived. And as the reflections on crisis as a turning point from the earlier chapter continue to drift around your mind like a thin veil of smoke, you begin to sense something deeper rising from beneath the surface. That even in the most fractured moments of life, the human being is quietly confronted by a powerful, lingering question: what is right? When the old structure collapses, when the former self dissolves, when the long process of rebirth begins, we must rebuild from the ground up. And whether we realize it or not, that foundation is always laid with moral values. As the journey moves from crisis into steadier ground, you step into a space where the search is no longer about surviving the break, but about living rightly after it. How to act toward others, how to face yourself with integrity. This is where ethics enters, not as a rigid code, but as a gentle compass helping us navigate the days when the inner sky feels most clouded. Aristotle once wrote in Nicomachean Ethics, "The aim of the wise is not to secure pleasure, but to avoid pain." But ethics is not merely avoiding pain, it is the art of living without betraying your own soul. Across the history of philosophy, three great streams have always flowed side by side, like three rivers converging into the same ocean: consequentialism, deontology, and virtue ethics. Three different approaches, yet all seeking to answer the same seemingly simple but deeply profound question: what is the right thing to do? Let us step slowly into each one, listening to their breath in the silence of this night. First is consequentialism, the view that the moral worth of an action lies in its outcomes. An action is right if it brings about the greatest benefit, reduces harm, or maximizes well-being for the greatest number. Jeremy Bentham, founder of utilitarianism, wrote in An Introduction to the Principles of Morals and Legislation, "It is the greatest happiness of the greatest number that is the measure of right and wrong." This is the spirit of consequentialism, looking at results, at the collective, at the broader consequences. It brings compassion and practicality, yet also raises difficult questions. Can one be sacrificed to save many? Does the end always justify the means? Consequentialism invites sweeping reflections, but it also reveals the limits of calculation, for life is not always a clear equation of maximum happiness. Then we step into deontology, the ethics of duty, where Kant's voice reverberates with unwavering clarity. Here, the rightness of an action does not depend on the outcome, but on the principle behind it. Kant famously wrote in Groundwork of the Metaphysics of Morals, "Act only according to that maxim whereby you can at the same time will that it should become a universal law," meaning, act only in ways you believe everyone should act. It is the space of integrity, of unbreakable principles, where dignity matters more than gain. But deontology can also be rigid, for life often arrives in shades of uncertainty, not in the perfect clarity Kant imagined. And then we arrive at virtue ethics. The oldest approach, rooted in Aristotle and revived in modern philosophy. Virtue ethics does not ask, is this action right or wrong? It asks, who do I wish to become? For virtue ethics, righteousness arises from character, from the qualities cultivated day by day: courage, honesty, kindness, moderation, justice. Aristotle believed ethics was not a series of isolated decisions, but a habit, a shaping of the self. You become good by repeatedly doing good, not because someone demands it, but because you want to become the best version of yourself. When these three traditions stand beside one another in the quiet of the night, they feel like three candles casting three different colors of light across the same room, the room of moral life. And each shows you a different angle of the same question: how should I live? After a crisis, humans often ask these questions more seriously than ever. When the old structure collapses, we must choose how to rebuild, and ethics becomes the invisible blueprint guiding the creation of a new self. The chapter of breaking teaches rebirth. The chapter of ethics teaches how to live after being reborn. Someone emerging from crisis naturally wonders, how do I want to live from here? Consequentialism invites you to consider your impact on the world. Deontology invites you to look at the principles that anchor you. Virtue ethics invites you to grow from within. And the beauty of ethics is that you do not have to choose only one. You can act for good outcomes while staying true to your principles, while nurturing the virtues that make you whole. Ethics, in its deepest sense, is not theory. It is the quiet way you move through someone else's life. The gentle word no one required you to say, the promise you kept even when no one watched. The moment you did the right thing simply because your soul would not let you do otherwise. In nights like this, when the mind moves slowly like a drifting river, you begin to feel that ethics is not a strict formula, but a balance. A bridge between crisis and the new life formed after it. A foundation for every chapter that follows. Søren Kierkegaard wrote in Either Or, to choose is to commit. When you choose a set of values, one stream, or a blend of all three, you are committing to your own becoming. That commitment shapes how you love, how you hurt, how you forgive, how you rise after storms. Ethics does not merely tell you what is right. Ethics teaches you to become someone you can meet in the mirror without looking away. And as this chapter of ethical reflection closes, notice how a soft steadiness spreads through you, as if after so many layers of contemplation on emotion, memory, and crisis, your mind has finally found a place to stand, to breathe. And from this grounded place, the next chapter will gently guide you into another essential question. How do we know what we know? Where knowledge, doubt, and truth open yet another quiet door in the depth of this night. And as the reflections on ethics from the previous chapter continue to settle beneath your feet like a quiet, steady foundation, you begin to feel that tonight's philosophical journey is opening a new door, not a door toward right or wrong as ethical contemplation once offered, but a door leading to the very nature of knowledge itself. For after asking, "How should I live?" the next question has always been, "How do I know what is true?" From the realm of moral understanding, the stream of contemplation carries us gently into the deeper search for truth, where epistemology, the study of knowledge, steps forward like a silent but profound presence, placing into our hands the very questions humanity has wrestled with for thousands of years. In the quiet of this night, as your breath slows and your mind softens after the many layers we have traveled through, the question, "How do we know what we know?" no longer feels intimidating. It feels like a whisper, inviting you into an exploration of truth, belief, and awareness. Epistemology does not ask what we should do. It asks how we come to know anything at all. It seeks not answers of action, but answers of understanding. Here, philosophy becomes subtle, because it does not examine the world itself. It examines the instrument through which we perceive the world. Plato wrote in The Republic, "Knowledge is the food of the soul. But to nourish the soul with knowledge, we must first understand what knowledge truly is." Plato distinguished between doxa, belief, opinion, assumption, and episteme, true knowledge. To him, knowledge is not merely correctness. It is correctness built upon reason, grounded in logic, supported by a reality independent of our feelings. A belief can be right by accident. Knowledge is right for a reason. And so, epistemology asks, when does belief become knowledge? When is what we think is true actually true? And most importantly, can we ever be certain in a world that constantly changes beneath our feet? When Descartes began doubting everything, the senses, memory, the world itself, he found only one point that could not be doubted. In Meditations, he wrote, "Cogito, ergo sum." I think, therefore I am. Even if everything else is illusion, the very act of doubting proves the existence of the doubter. But epistemology today travels far beyond Descartes. It does not only ask, what is knowledge? It asks, how do we acquire it? Can we trust perception? Is reason absolute? Can personal experience count as evidence? And how easily can we be wrong even when we feel completely right? Think back to the earlier exploration of memory. How memory is reconstruction, not recording. Meaning, much of what we know about the past is a creation. Think back to the deeper examination of emotion, how emotion arises before thought, and interpretations bend reality. Meaning, much of what we know about the present is shaped by feeling. Think back to the study of the unconscious, the hidden currents guiding more of our lives than we ever see. Meaning, much of what we know about ourselves comes from forces we do not access, and placing these three together reveals a humbling truth. Human knowledge is more fragile than we imagine. Not to shame us, but to soften us, to remind us that certainty is rare, but deeper understanding always appears when we learn to doubt gently. David Hume wrote in An Enquiry Concerning Human Understanding, "A wise man proportions his belief to the evidence. The wise person does not believe absolutely, nor doubt absolutely. They believe in proportion to what they can see, test, reason through, and they remain willing to revise their beliefs when the world gives them new evidence." As you listen to this in the steady rhythm of the night, a tender truth emerges. Knowledge is not a fixed possession, it is a river. always flowing, always changing as you change, always deepening when you listen more softly, always widening when you open your heart. And though epistemology may seem theoretical, it touches daily life in the gentlest but most transformative ways. Consider, how many times have you been certain someone disliked you, only to learn they were simply hurting inside? How many times have you believed you were not enough, only to discover that belief was built on distorted memories? How many times have you trusted fear over truth, only to find that fear was the echo of emotion arriving before awareness? Epistemology teaches us this simple, healing truth. A belief is not always knowledge. Beliefs can be shaped by emotion, bent by memory, influenced by insecurity, or inherited from pain. Which is why the journey toward true understanding does not begin with certainty. It begins with curiosity, with the willingness to ask questions, with the courage to consider that we might be mistaken, with the gentleness to welcome new truth when it appears. Plato wrote in Apology, "The only true wisdom is in knowing you know nothing." Not pessimism, liberation. When you embrace the limits of your knowledge, you become open to learning, open to others, open to yourself, and from that openness, deeper truth can enter, which is why epistemology, though quiet, is a crucial part of healing, because many of our wounds are built on false beliefs. I am unworthy. I am not enough. I will always be abandoned. I cannot change. These beliefs are not truths. They are misinformed conclusions written in moments of pain. And when we learn to examine our beliefs through the gentle lens of epistemology, we loosen those old stories. We begin to see them as hypotheses, not facts. We begin to rewrite them with accuracy, with kindness, with clarity. And the journey shifts from the question of what is right to the question of what is true, together forming the compass that guides us through life. And as this chapter of contemplation closes, let the softness of understanding settle into your mind. For the night grows deeper, the thoughts grow clearer, and the next chapter will gently guide you toward another realm. The art of boundaries, the quiet strength of saying no, and the tender protection of inner peace that every soul must learn in the long journey of being human. And as the reflections on epistemology from part 19 continue to settle like tiny particles of light in the quiet room of your mind, you begin to feel a subtle but profound shift from the question, "How do I know what I know?" to the question, "Do I have the right to protect what I know is true for myself?" From the search for knowledge, you step into the place where knowledge must turn into action, where all the understanding you've gathered about emotion, memory, the unconscious, and ethics can no longer remain only in thought, but must shape the way you preserve your inner peace against the demands, expectations, and pressures of the world. Tonight's philosophical journey enters one of life's gentlest yet most essential arts, the art of refusal, the art of setting healthy boundaries. This is not merely a story about the word no. It is the story of being honest with yourself, of listening to your body before it collapses, of protecting your mental energy before you are overwhelmed, of understanding that kindness is not infinite sacrifice, and that compassion does not mean accepting everything. For human beings often grow exhausted, not because they dislike what they do, but because they do not dare refuse what they do not want. In a world of constant noise, where everyone needs a little of you, a little time, a little effort, a little presence, the ability to say no is not just a skill, it is a way of preserving your essence. It is an act of care, the deepest one you can offer yourself. And this, though rarely spoken directly, is something many philosophers have hinted at throughout centuries. Epictetus wrote in Discourses, No person is free who is not master of himself. No one can truly be free without self-mastery. And self-mastery, in the reality of daily life, begins with knowing when to say no. But why is this simple word so difficult? Because humans, in their core, long to be accepted, to be loved, to feel that they are doing the right thing. The fear of being rejected makes us afraid to reject. The fear of disappointing others makes us abandon ourselves. The obsession with being a good person tricks us into believing that refusal is unkind. But the truth is this: kindness cannot survive when you continuously harm yourself. A heart without strength cannot keep loving. A mind without rest cannot remain clear. A person who always says yes cannot remain whole. Saying no is not pushing others away. It is pulling yourself closer, closer to your truth, closer to your natural limits, closer to the life you actually wish to live. On quiet nights like this one, when you look back at the times you felt overwhelmed, you may notice that exhaustion does not come from doing too much, but from doing what you did not want to do. From saying, okay, when every part of you whispered, I can't. From staying silent when you needed to draw a line. From nodding because you were afraid someone might be hurt. These are not failures. They are simply the natural consequences of not yet learning how to set boundaries. For boundaries are not walls. They are doors. Doors for which you hold the key. Opening when you choose, closing when you need rest. Saying no is not rejecting others, it is accepting yourself. A simple truth echoed in a well-known Eastern saying, "You cannot pour from an empty cup." And though this line does not appear in Western classical philosophy, it echoes perfectly in the stillness of this night. You cannot give what your heart has already spent. Boundaries are what keep you from emptying out. They are the harbor where your mind returns after long days. They are the space between you and the world that allows you not to dissolve into the expectations placed upon you. They help you see clearly what is a true responsibility and what is merely a fear of being judged. Setting healthy boundaries is a moral act toward yourself, a natural extension of the ethical living explored earlier. For ethics are not only how you treat others, they are also how you treat yourself. You cannot call it moral to love everyone else while abandoning your own soul. And so no does not need to be sharp. It can be soft, gentle, like a slow breath. I want to help, but I don't have the strength. I care, but I need time for myself. I understand, but I cannot take this on. It is not rejection, it is honesty. And when you are honest about your limits, you give others the chance to understand you more deeply. You also give yourself permission to live more lightly. And in this honesty, relationships become more genuine. For love is not blind sacrifice. Love is transparency, seeing one another clearly, including each other's limits and needs. Marcus Aurelius wrote in Meditations, "The soul becomes dyed with the color of its thoughts." If your mind constantly tells you, I must endure, I must accept, I cannot say no, then your soul will be dyed in the colors of exhaustion. But if your mind knows, I'm allowed to stop, I'm allowed to protect myself, your soul will regain the colors of freedom. Strangely, the kinder a person is, the harder it is for them to say no. The more sensitive they are, the more difficult boundaries become. The deeper they feel, the more afraid they are of hurting others. And yet, people like that, people like you, are the ones who most need boundaries, because soft hearts break easily, because wide souls fill quickly with the expectations of others. And in the silence of this night, you may ask yourself a small but honest question. Am I holding on out of love or out of fear of losing someone? The stream of philosophy moves like breath, guiding us from the questions of knowledge to the questions of self-protection, and both require deep awareness. When you understand yourself, you will know what to keep and what to release. You will learn to say no without guilt. You will begin to reclaim the peace you thought you had lost. And as this chapter closes, allow your heart to slow just a little, as if it has begun to understand that peace does not come from answering every call the world makes, but from honoring your natural limits. For in the next part, this journey will guide you toward a new way of thinking, where breaking assumptions and returning to the essence of things becomes the key to seeing life with clearer, brighter, and freer eyes than ever before. And as the gentle resonance of boundary setting continues to ripple like a soft wave across the lake of your emotions, a different kind of movement begins to appear ahead. One that does not turn toward limits, nor toward knowledge, nor toward memory, but toward the very roots of thought itself. Tonight's philosophical journey carries you away from the questions of the heart into a deeper space, a space where you no longer ask, "What must I protect?" but instead, "What if the things I believe are not actually true in their essence?" And this is where first principles thinking arrives, like a thin but piercing beam of light, cutting through the layers of assumptions you have carried unconsciously through your life. First principles thinking is the art of dismantling everything back to its most original essence, then rebuilding not from habit, not from inherited beliefs, not from what others have done, but from the purest truth you can touch. This is not the technique of the intelligent. It is the instinct of the philosopher, the one who dares to question what everyone else considers obvious. Aristotle wrote in Metaphysics, "The first principle is the starting point of knowledge." And this remains true even now. When you think by habit, you walk an old road. When you think by first principles, you break the old road apart and lay each stone yourself. It sounds powerful, yet in truth it is gentle, because it invites you back to the essence buried beneath expectation, fear, pressure, and inherited belief. When you set boundaries, you said no to what did not fit. But when you think from first principles, you ask, "Why did I ever think it fit in the first place?" Breaking assumptions is not rebellion against the world, it is returning to the truth within. Many assumptions you hold about love, work, success, money, or your own capacity are not conclusions but scripts inherited from childhood, society, or a past version of yourself. And in the quiet of the night, listening to the soft rhythm of your breath, you can sense how many parts of your life were not chosen consciously, but accepted unconsciously. From everyone says so. From "it's always been this way." From "people like me must do this." But what has always been does not mean it is true, or right, or yours. First principles. Thinking slows everything into 3 gentle movements. Strip the problem of all assumptions. Ask what is undeniably true, your truth here and now. Rebuild from that foundation with logic, intuition, experience, and honesty. Elon Musk once said, "You boil things down to the most fundamental truths and then reason up from there." Though not a classical philosopher, his words echo Aristotle and Descartes. The spirit of beginning again, of refusing borrowed thought, of returning to original truth. Imagine a piece of old wood covered in layers of lacquer and dust. First principles thinking is like gently wiping away those layers to reveal the grain beneath, the pattern you forgot existed. Thought works the same way. When you ask the right question, everything shifts. Instead of asking, "How do I make everyone like me?" you ask, "Do I truly need everyone to like me?" Instead of asking, "How do I succeed like them?" you ask, "What do I truly want?" Instead of asking, How do I avoid failure? You ask. What does failure really mean to me? When the question changes, the life changes. First principles is the courage to dismantle old mental structures, similar to an emotional breakdown, but this time chosen, conscious, gentle, and strangely, the older we grow, the more we realize many assumptions we lived by were not parts of us, but layers of dust. The mind does not need more information, it needs less noise. As Nietzsche wrote in The Twilight of the Idols, there are no facts, only interpretations. If most of the world is interpretation, then first principles thinking is the journey back to the one ground untouched by interpretation, the ground of essence. And the beauty of first principles thinking is this: it liberates. It lets you begin again. It lets you dismantle your life and rebuild it without being chained to the past. It opens creativity. It opens freedom. It opens lightness. When you lay down a problem and look at it anew, you may see that things you once thought had to be that way no longer make sense. Perhaps you do not need to work endlessly to be worthy. Perhaps you do not need perfection to be loved. Perhaps you do not need to be strong all the time. Perhaps you do not need to keep relationships that have faded. Perhaps you do not need to live the way society told you to. Perhaps you simply need to live according to your essence. A natural flow reveals itself. Boundaries protect you. First principles reveal you. One is defense. The other is reconstruction. And as this chapter closes, you may feel a new clarity rising inside you, as if the fog around your thoughts has thinned and your awareness now sees where before there were only shadows. Your breath softens, your body loosens, and the path ahead will carry you deeper still, into places where emotional intelligence, resilience, and the quiet art of growing under pressure unfold before you like silent doors opening in the night. And as the delicate light of first principles thinking continues to quietly illuminate the deepest corners of your mind, you begin to feel a very natural shift, as though, after dismantling old assumptions and seeing the essence of every problem, the next step no longer belongs to thought, but to emotion. The journey descends like a long, calm breath, leaving behind the structures of the intellect to return to the gentle but commanding currents of the heart. For no matter how precisely a person can think, no life can be lived in fullness without understanding emotion, not only one's own, but also the emotions of others. And this is where emotional intelligence, or EI, appears like a quiet landscape of depth, containing within it the power to shape the entirety of your inner world. EI is not hypersensitivity, not sentimentality, nor the superficial ability to read others. EI is the capacity to listen to yourself before reacting. It is the ability to understand what is unfolding inside your body before the mind invents an incorrect story. It is the ability to look into someone's eyes and sense what they chose not to put into words. It is the ability to pause, draw a slow breath, and choose a response instead of an impulse. In the stillness of night, when the outer world grows silent, the subtleties of emotional intelligence become more audible than ever. It is like the beating of the heart, a rhythm so familiar you forget it exists, until the moment you pay attention and realize it governs your life far more than any thought ever will. EI begins with the simplest, yet most difficult act: identifying your emotions. Most people do not truly know what they feel. You know you are uncomfortable, but not whether it is sadness or anger. You know you are anxious, but not what the anxiety is reaching toward. You know you are hurting, but not whether the pain belongs to the present moment or echoes from an older memory. And when you cannot name what you feel, you misinterpret yourself. You choose the wrong remedy. You act from self-protection rather than authenticity. In truth, the person who can say, "I am sad, I'm afraid, I'm overwhelmed, I'm triggered," has already walked halfway through the journey of EI. Emotions, like children, soften the moment they are called by their true name. After identification comes regulation, something the earlier teachings quietly prepared you for. If you have learned that emotions arise before consciousness can interpret them, then EI becomes the bridge that allows awareness to catch up, to soften the sharpness of automatic reactions. It is the moment you want to say something harsh, yet you pause to breathe. The moment fear pushes you to retreat, yet you choose to remain and observe the emotion instead of being controlled by it. EI is never the suppression of emotion. It is standing beside your emotion and saying, "I hear you. I am here. But I will choose what happens next." That is genuine maturity. And then EI expands outward into the social world, where humans speak constantly through things that are not words. A flicker of the eyes, a slight shrug, a breath held too long, a silence that feels heavier than sound. A person with EI does not analyze these signals. They sense them. They feel them in the way mirror neurons reflect another's emotional state. They feel them through the kind of listening that becomes a sanctuary. They feel them in the way the body often knows before the mind knows. EI is the natural convergence of everything you have learned so far. The unconscious, reconstructed memory, bodily intuition, emotional sequencing, boundaries, and the clarity of first principles thinking, all merging into the ability to understand others through the doorway of understanding yourself. Because no one can truly comprehend another until they have learned to comprehend their own inner world. Aristotle once wrote, "Knowing yourself is the beginning of all wisdom," and EI is the intimate act of knowing yourself, not through reason alone, but through the quiet observation of your inner life. A person with high EI is not someone who never gets angry. They are someone who understands where their anger is born. Not someone who is never sad, but someone who understands what their sadness is trying to protect. Not someone who is always fine, but someone who knows how to care for themselves when they are not fine. Their strength does not lie in invulnerability, but in authenticity. And authenticity is what gives rise to deep connection, a fundamental element of EI. Humans do not connect through words. They connect through presence. When you stand before someone with genuine emotional intelligence, you feel safe without knowing why. Because they are not pretending. Because they are not performing. Because they are here. And safety creates opening. The kind of opening that allows real listening, real vulnerability, real connection. In this way, EI becomes a form of healing. Nietzsche once wrote, "Invisible threads are the strongest ties." Those invisible threads, empathy, presence, attunement, are the very fibers from which EI is woven. But EI is not only a bridge toward others, it is a bridge toward yourself. It is the small flame you carry into the corners of your inner darkness. It is the gentle hand you place on your chest when your heart tightens. It is the breath you take when the world becomes too loud. It is the whisper inside saying, "It's all right. This feeling has a reason, and I can take care of it." When you asked which assumptions shape your life, EI quietly answered, "Look at the emotions beneath them." When you learned to set boundaries, EI helped you see which emotions were exhausted by every reluctant yes. When you questioned knowledge, EI reminded you that emotion, too, is a form of knowledge. The knowledge of the body, of the unconscious, of the heart. When all of these layers come together, you finally see that EI is not a skill. It is a form of inner wisdom. And as this chapter of the night draws gently to a close, you may feel a warm softness expanding within your chest, as though someone has laid a gentle hand over your heart and whispered, "You have spent your whole life listening to the world. It is time to listen to yourself, too." Ahead of you, the journey will continue into resilience, into the art of growing through pressure, into the ways a human being becomes stronger, not despite pain, but because of it. But for now, rest in the quiet tenderness of understanding yourself, a subtle light glowing softly in the long, peaceful night. And as the gentle warmth of emotional intelligence still lingers around you like a soft mist settling over the soul, you begin to feel a new movement rising within tonight's journey, a movement toward an inner strength that is neither hardness nor endurance, but the quiet ability to grow through the upheavals of life. From the softness of the heart, we step into a realm where pressure is no longer a threat, but the raw material from which a different version of ourselves is shaped, wiser, deeper, and more resilient. This is the spirit of the anti-fragile, a bold idea opened by Nassim Nicholas Taleb to say that there are things in life that do not merely withstand chaos, but become stronger because of it. Just as muscles must tear in order to grow, or as a flame flares brighter with a passing gust of wind. Anti-fragile does not ask you to be strong in a forced, stoic way. It only asks you to allow yourself to change as life changes, to permit your own reconstruction after every collapse. Like the art of kintsugi, where gold is used to mend the cracks of broken pottery, anti-fragile teaches that wounds are not marks of shame, but signatures of growth. Nietzsche once wrote, "What does not kill me makes me stronger." But in the light of this perspective, that sentence is no longer a slogan of endurance. It becomes a gentle reminder that survival is not merely overcoming, but evolving. Every emotional shock, every upheaval, every separation, every ache is like a gust of wind. It may extinguish a fragile candle, but it will only feed a strong flame. And when you look back on the hardest moments of your life, perhaps you will realize that they opened parts of you could never touch during peaceful days. Resilience brings us back to who we were. Anti-fragile takes us to someone new, someone who doesn't just survive, but deepens. Anti-fragile does not invite you to become steel. It invites you to become fire. Fire that trembles but still shines. Fire that bends but still burns. Fire that rises higher every time the wind pushes hard. And to become fire, emotional intelligence must be present. For EI allows you to feel, and the anti-fragile allows you to turn those feelings into strength. When these two meet, you not only process emotion, you transform it. When a door closes, you do not simply become sad, you understand the inner reason. When a relationship fractures, you do not simply break, you learn how to love yourself better. When an event upends your life, you do not simply repair, you recreate. And in the night stillness, you may sense this truth more clearly than ever. Some of the strongest parts of you only awaken when you touch the bottom of exhaustion. Some of the most resilient parts of you only appear when life tests you to your edges. Some of the most beautiful parts of you only bloom after your heart has broken in ways you once thought you could not survive. The essence of the human being is not fragility. The essence of the human being is rebirth. And if you are walking through a difficult chapter now, perhaps you are not breaking, you are growing into a form you do not yet fully understand. From emotional softness, you step into inner endurance. From woundedness, you step into reconstruction. From chaos, you step into a version of yourself that is brighter, wider, and deeper. Notice this. There is a small part of you, a part you thought was exhausted, warming again. It is the part that wants to live. the part that wants to grow, the part that wants to continue. And as part 23 closes, let that small light remain with you, like a quiet, steady ember reminding you that you are not only capable of enduring, you are capable of becoming stronger through the very things that once caused you pain. And as the inner fire of anti-fragile strength continues to glow within you like a small but enduring flame, so you begin to sense a very different terrain unfolding. Not a place shaped by the challenges of the outer world, but the deepest chamber of the mind, where a quiet yet persistent voice resides. The inner critic, the old shadow that follows every human as faithfully as breath. The journey seems to pause for a moment, moving away from the power of rebirth to touch the soft wounds within, because sometimes what exhausts us most is not life's difficulties, but the voice in our own head, the voice that insists we are not enough, that we are wrong, that we are useless, that we are unworthy, that everything we try will fail. The inner critic is not born from intelligence. It is born from reconstructed memories, from unhealed wounds, from distorted expectations, from old disappointments that linger like scars, from the harsh words of someone we once trusted, from the comparisons that made us shrink, from the moments we were overlooked, and over time, these fragments hardened into a strict internal voice, always standing behind us, always whispering that we are not good enough. Jung once wrote in Modern Man in Search of a Soul, "I'm not what happened to me. I'm what I choose to become." But the inner critic does the opposite. It tries to drag us back into what has already happened, making us believe that the past defines us completely. It is the echo of old wounds wearing the mask of truth. It does not predict the future. It only repeats yesterday's fears. And because its voice rises from within, we believe it more easily than anything or anyone else. That is why Nietzsche wrote in Beyond Good and Evil, "The voice of your own shadow can be the loudest, for often it is the shadow inside us, the unhealed, frightened part, that brings us to our knees the fastest." Yet the inner critic is not the enemy. It is simply the unhealed part of us, the part that fears, the part that wants to protect us from being hurt again, even though its protection suffocates us and turns us against ourselves. And to soothe it, we do not need to fight it. Fighting only strengthens it. We only need to recognize it and gently ask, is this really true? Is this my voice or the voice of my past? If my best friend were hurting, would I speak to them this way? And that last question is often the awakening, because we suddenly see that we have never offered ourselves the kindness we so freely give to others. When the inner critic says, "You failed," we can answer softly, with the compassion rooted deep within us. "It's all right, I'm learning." When it says, "You are useless," we can breathe deeply and say, "I am growing." When it says, "You are unworthy," we can place a hand over the heart and whisper, "I am healing." And within that gentleness, the inner guide, the voice of intuition, wisdom, and essence, begins to emerge. It is warm, steady, unhurried, never judgmental. It does not make us smaller. It helps us return to who we truly are. Quieting the inner critic does not mean silencing it forever. It will return when we are tired, when we are afraid, when we step into something new. But each time it reappears, we will recognize it sooner, understand it more clearly, and return it to where it belongs, not as the navigator of our life, but as a frightened child in the mind who simply needs reassurance. And as this reflection settles into the slow rhythm of the night, you may feel something very subtle yet very real, that beneath every harsh thought, beneath every wave of self-doubt, beneath every fear, there has always been another voice, warmer, softer, truer, waiting patiently for you to listen. And from that quiet place, the next part of the journey will unfold, leading you deeper into awareness and inner freedom. And as the gentle whisper of the inner critic settles down like a small wave retreating from the shore, we step into a different moment of tonight's journey. A moment when the mind grows clearer, calmer, and peaceful enough to look at life from an entirely new angle. If the previous reflection helped you understand the voices within, then this next idea invites you to look outward in a way that feels unfamiliar, yet profoundly illuminating. Instead of asking, "How do I succeed?" you ask, "What could make me fail?" Inversion thinking, the art of flipping the problem, is exactly that quiet, elegant movement where wisdom is built not by chasing the light of what we desire, but by examining the shadows of what we must avoid. And strangely, some of the most insightful paths open not by visualizing the best outcomes, but by bravely imagining the worst. Inversion thinking does not ask you to think negatively. It asks you to think truthfully. It does not cultivate pessimism, it cultivates clarity. Because most failures in life do not arise from lack of talent or effort, but from the small traps we overlook, the subtle missteps we dismiss, the seemingly insignificant factors that can collapse an entire plan. If the lesson of embracing chaos taught you to grow stronger through difficulty, and the lesson of softening your inner voice taught you to be gentler with yourself, then inversion thinking teaches you to see life with sharper awareness. Like a climber who not only watches the summit, but also notices each loose stone that could send them falling. Charlie Munger, the mind behind the philosophy of inversion, once said, "All I want to know is where I'm going to die, so I'll never go there." It sounds extreme, yet it holds a simple truth. Knowing what leads to failure is one of the most reliable ways to succeed. Not because you avoid life, but because you understand the architecture of failure. You do not walk into the fog blindly. You learn what to subtract, not just what to add. Inversion thinking reflects a kind of psychological maturity. The young ask, "How do I gain?" while the grown ask, "How do I avoid losing what matters?" And when night deepens, when the external noise dissolves, what remains in the mind is not the grand dream, but the quiet fear, the things we avoid, deny, or refuse to examine. Inversion thinking helps you look at these shadows without trembling, without avoidance, without confusing them with your identity, seeing them instead as neutral data. Think of it this way. If you want happiness, instead of asking, "What must I do to be happy?" you ask, "What is making me unhappy right now?" Perhaps it is a toxic environment. Perhaps it is unrealistic expectations. Perhaps the inner critic. Perhaps the forgotten art of self-love. Remove the knots one by one and happiness reveals itself as naturally as sunlight when you draw back the curtains. If you want love, instead of asking, "How do I make someone love me more?" you ask, "What causes relationships to fall apart?" A lack of listening, a lack of empathy, a lack of emotional maturity, a lack of boundaries. Understanding these not only strengthens your relationships, but also makes your love more human, more genuine. If you want self-growth instead of chasing techniques, you ask, "What is holding me back?" Maybe procrastination, maybe fear of failure, maybe false assumptions that need to be dismantled. Maybe the inner critic still pulling the strings. Only when you see the roots clearly can you truly grow. Inversion thinking also opens a deeper philosophical reflection. To understand light, you must understand shadow. To know what you want to become, you must know what you must never return to. Nietzsche reminded us in Thus Spoke Zarathustra. You must have chaos within you to give birth to a dancing star. The chaos here is not turmoil, It is honesty. Honesty with what you fear, what you avoid, what you suppress. Inversion thinking touches that inner darkness, not to drown you in it, but to illuminate it, name it, and walk out of it with awareness. The quiet beauty of inversion is the sense of liberation it brings. You no longer need to know every strategy for success. You only need to know a few undeniable causes of failure and avoid them. Avoid blaming others. Avoid self-sabotage. Avoid overestimating your abilities without facing reality. Avoid trusting what has no evidence. Avoid letting emotions drive the wheel. Avoid letting memory distort truth. When you avoid these, the path ahead becomes naturally clear. As this reflection gently settles, you may feel a soft realization. Inversion thinking does not make you fearful. It makes you steady. It does not breed pessimism. It breeds precision. It does not insist that life is full of traps. It simply teaches you how to walk wisely among them. And when placed beside all the inner lessons of this night, the journey becomes increasingly whole. From emotion to intellect, from wounds to rebirth, from the inner critic to inversion, each layer guiding you toward a self that is clearer, steadier, and more awake, ready for the next quiet chapter of this long, gentle night. And as the clarity of inversion thinking lingers like a thin mist settling over the surface of your mind, gently revealing the things that could trip you, the things worth avoiding, tonight's philosophical journey invites you to take yet another step inward. This time not by flipping the problem upside down, but by lightening it. If inversion thinking taught you to see the shadows in order to understand the light, then this next idea asks you to release the unnecessary weight your mind has been quietly carrying, to return to the simplest, most distilled essence of truth. This is the spirit of Occam's razor, one of the oldest principles in Western philosophy, where William of Ockham suggested that when multiple explanations can account for the same phenomenon, you should choose the simplest one, the one requiring the fewest assumptions, not because life is simple, but because the human mind is extraordinarily good at making everything more complicated than it needs to be. Occam's razor is more than a logical tool. It is a way of living. For the older you grow, the more you realize that most of life's suffering does not come from reality itself, but from the layers of stories your mind adds on top of reality. A message left unseen, a brief ambiguous glance, a moment of silence. Each of these things often has a simple explanation, yet the mind, especially a mind shaped by old wounds and the lingering echo of the inner critic, prefers to weave complex narratives filled with fear, doubt, and imagined catastrophes. If inversion thinking asks, what could go wrong? Occam's razor asks, what is the simplest thing that is actually happening? The more you practice this principle in daily life, the more you realize how often you have been the one complicating your own peace. Someone doesn't reply to your message, not because they dislike you, but because they are busy. A project goes wrong, not because you are incompetent, but because of a simple miscommunication. You feel low, not because life is collapsing, but because you didn't sleep well. A relationship cools, not because love has died, but because both of you are tired. Yet the mind, especially a mind influenced by fear, distorted memory, or emotional misinterpretation, tends to choose the most complicated, most self-blaming explanation. Occam's razor is a soft cloth that wipes away those unnecessary layers. Aristotle wrote in Posterior Analytics, nature operates in the shortest way possible. Nature does not complicate itself, and our minds, if given the chance, can learn to do the same. The more assumptions you pile onto reality, the further you drift from truth, and truth, more often than not, is gentler than you expect. Occam's razor does not claim that the world is always simple. It merely teaches that simplicity should be your starting point. If simplicity proves insufficient, then you add complexity, but never start with complexity. This is not just the foundation of scientific reasoning. It is the foundation of inner calm. For a mind that knows how to choose simplicity is a mind that learns to save itself from drowning in self-created storms. Look honestly at yourself. How many times have you exhausted your energy overthinking something that was never real? How many times have you blamed yourself for things that had nothing to do with you? How many times have you assumed the worst simply because fear arrived before awareness? How many times have you misread someone's silence because your memory, as fragile and reconstructive as it is, filled in the blanks with shadows? How many times have you misinterpreted someone you love because your emotions were louder than the moment itself? Occam's razor encourages you to pause before spiraling and ask one simple question. What is the simplest explanation here? And suddenly, the mind softens, the heartbeat steadies, the breath deepens, anxiety dissolves, because most of your suffering was never caused by life itself, but by the stories you added to life. Yet the simplicity Occam invites is not naive. It is the quiet purity of wisdom. Wittgenstein wrote in the Tractatus, "Everything that can be said clearly." Anything excessively complicated, vague, or dramatic is often a product of imagination, not reality. Truth tends to stand quietly. Occam's razor also becomes a compass for relationships. When someone is silent, instead of thinking they're pulling away, remember, they might just be tired. When someone says something clumsy, instead of thinking they wanted to hurt me, remember, maybe they were stressed. When you make a mistake, instead of thinking I'm terrible, remember, everyone makes mistakes. I can grow from this. This is not denial. It is clarity, seeing the truth without the extra weight of fear. From inversion thinking to simplicity, you journey from the sharpness of examining shadows to the spaciousness of removing them. One helps you avoid harm, the other helps you avoid unnecessary suffering. One teaches you to look outward with caution, the other clears the inner fog. Together, they make your inner world lighter, clearer, more breathable. And as this reflection softens into silence, you may feel a beautiful kind of emptiness opening within you. Not the emptiness of lacking something, but the emptiness of space. Space where your mind is no longer cluttered with imagined stories. Space where answers become gentle. Space where life itself becomes easier to inhale. As though, after a long day of carrying invisible burdens, you have finally set them down, not because you found the perfect explanation, but because you found the simplest one. Simple enough to let you rest under the quiet sky of this long, gentle night. And as the elegant simplicity of Occam's razor lingers in your mind, like a thin current of wind clearing away mental clutter, making everything lighter, quieter, and more spacious, you step gently into the next idea with a question that rises naturally from that very clarity. If life can indeed be this simple, then how is it that the smallest actions we take can sometimes create the greatest changes in our lives? Changes born not from force, but from understanding, from structure, from strategy, from insight. And this is where the concept of leverage begins to unfold before you like a quiet bridge between simplicity and impact. For leverage is the art of allowing small things to produce large outcomes, just as Archimedes once declared, "Give me a place to stand, and I will move the earth." You do not need more strength. You need the right point of support. You do not need to work harder. You need to place your energy where it multiplies. You do not need to exhaust yourself. You need to find the factor that transforms one unit of effort into 10 or 100. just as a single drop of ink can color an entire glass of water, or a single ray of light can brighten a whole room. When you understand leverage, you begin to see that life is not driven only by effort, but by structure. Not only by movement, but by direction. Not only by quantity, but by the quality of each choice. There are three essential forms of leverage in life: tools, skills, and people. The elements that can turn one simple action into a cascade of results. Tools allow systems and technology to lift the weight for you. Skills let your mind, language, and refinement create long-reaching effects. People, not through exploitation, but through harmony. Multiply your impact through connection, trust, and shared intention. When you rely only on brute force, you're like someone pushing a heavy boulder uphill. But when you use leverage, you need only one precise push for the entire boulder to move. And in the flow of tonight's philosophy, leverage becomes something more than a technique. It becomes an awakening, a reminder that you do not have to deplete yourself to be deserving of the good things in life. You only need to understand how life works, find the right point of support, and place yourself there with gentleness. Every insight before this has quietly held a form of leverage. Boundaries become emotional leverage, saving you from burnout. First principles become cognitive leverage, freeing you from inherited assumptions. Emotional intelligence becomes interpersonal leverage, letting you connect deeply with others. Anti-fragility becomes resilience leverage, helping you grow stronger through difficulty. Quieting the inner critic becomes psychological leverage, liberating you from invisible chains. Inversion thinking becomes strategic leverage, showing you what to avoid to succeed. Occam's razor becomes clarity leverage, shortening the path to truth. And now all of these forms gather into one understanding. The true power of a human being lies not in force, but in placement. Not in strain, but in alignment. Yet leverage is not only found in thought, it lives in the small rhythms of everyday life. One tiny habit can become the lever of an entire future. Reading one page a night can become a library of wisdom over years. Walking 10 minutes a day can transform your health. Offering one sincere compliment can shift someone's entire emotional landscape. And the beauty is this: leverage grows out of what is small, gentle, and doable, the very quality your mind, softened by the night, can access without effort. In Eastern philosophy, leverage appears in the symbol of water. Water is soft, yet it overcomes stone, not through force, but through constancy and direction. A single droplet falling long enough will carve a hole into rock. A tiny stream flowing patiently will one day shape a valley. That is leverage, the strength of patient movement in the right direction. Nietzsche wrote in The Gay Science, "He who has a why to live can bear almost any how." When you know your why, you find your point of leverage. And when you find your leverage, every how becomes lighter. Because your effort no longer spills into the wrong places, it deepens exactly where it matters. In relationships, leverage is found in listening, in tenderness, in emotional understanding. A small shift in how you show up can completely transform the depth of the bond. In creativity, leverage is a single idea arriving at the right moment. In work, leverage is the system, tool, or automation that frees you from busy work, so you can focus on what truly matters. In self-growth, leverage is choosing one meaningful habit instead of overwhelming yourself with 10. And as this reflection comes to a close, you may feel a subtle, comforting relief running through you, a realization that you do not need to strain in the darkness of life. You only need to find the right point of support. And in this quiet night, as your mind softens, you may sense that the greatest changes often come from the smallest choices, the deepest effects from the gentlest movements, the farthest journeys from the lightest steps. Like a drop of water, a flicker of light, a single breath, small but capable of transforming the whole space around it. And in that quiet recognition, this idea finds its place within your long journey, becoming a soft bridge that carries you toward even deeper reflections waiting for you in the silence of the night. And as the afterglow of leverage still drifts gently through your mind, like a faint current of light reminding you that a single well-placed action can alter the entire trajectory of a life, you step into a very different landscape of thought. A landscape where the power of the mind is no longer a point of support, but a labyrinth so intricate it can devour the very person who created it. For if earlier you learned how to do less and achieve more, now you must face the opposite danger, thinking so much that you become trapped inside your own thoughts. This is overthinking. The mental loop that exhausts you not because of what you do, but because of how endlessly, relentlessly you think without arriving anywhere. Overthinking is when the mind runs like a machine without an off switch, circling the same issue again and again, analyzing every scenario, then analyzing the ones that haven't happened, building entire stories that are not real and then believing they are about to unfold. The sad irony is this: the more you fear, the more you think. The more you think, the more you fear, like a wheel spinning endlessly with no place to rest. Beneath that loop lives fear, the fear of being wrong, the fear of losing, the fear of being hurt, the fear of repeating the past, the very fears we've touched again and again in the previous parts, but never looked at directly. And whenever you do not trust your own capacity, the mind tries to control the future by thinking more, only to collapse from the weight of trying to predict what can never be predicted. Kierkegaard once wrote, "Anxiety is the dizziness of freedom. When too many possibilities stretch before you, when too many paths open at once, the mind panics, terrified of choosing the wrong one. And so it thinks more and more and more, as if sheer quantity of thought could create safety. But the future does not open through analysis. It opens through movement. And when you think for too long, you lose the ability to step. Overthinking pulls you away from the present. You no longer see reality as it is, but through a lens of assumptions, projections, and imagined catastrophes. If earlier you learned to simplify, now you must see how often you complicate life with stories that never existed. A seen but unanswered message becomes evidence of distance. A casual remark turns into an insult. A moment of silence becomes an emergency. But none of that is truth. It is simply a frightened mind talking to itself. Marcus Aurelius once said, "Anxiety is within me, not outside. The fear is never in the world, it is in the way you interpret the world." Which is why escaping overthinking does not come from fighting thoughts, but from realizing that your mind is adding scenes to a movie reality never agreed to show. To step out of the loop, you do not need to think less. You need to trust more. Trust your intuition, trust your resilience, trust that whatever happens, you can handle it. Trust that nothing in this life can fully break you if you have grown through all the experiences that brought you here. When you trust, fear retreats. When fear retreats, overthinking dissolves. One of the gentlest ways out of the mental loop is to return to your breath, the one thing that simplicity always leads you back to. Breath does not require analysis. It only invites you to be here. Overthinking always belongs to the future. Peace exists only in the present. When you release the extra stories, the mind softens. When you stop trying to control what you cannot control, space opens. When you let thoughts drift by like passing clouds, Not grasping, not resisting, not judging. You begin to hear the quiet inside you again, the quiet you forgot because you were running too fast inside your own head. And as part 28 comes to a close, you may realize that most of the exhaustion you have carried is not from life itself, but from the moments when your mind ran far ahead while life moved slowly, patiently, gently. If you can slow down to the rhythm of the night, to the rhythm of your breath, to the rhythm of this story guiding you softly towards sleep, you will see that peace never left you. You simply thought too much to notice it. And as the whirlpools of thought from the previous part begin to settle the way a lake stills itself after a passing wind, you start to feel a very subtle shift inside, a gentle settling, as if beneath all the noise, there has always been a quiet landscape you have forgotten to visit. When overthinking dissolves, an empty space opens, and that space becomes a doorway into a state humans long for, but rarely enter. The state of flow, where you are no longer pulled by anxiety or scattered by distraction, but fully immersed in the aliveness of this single moment. If mental loops make you lose your way, flow brings you home, like water returning to the riverbed it has always belonged to. Flow is a gift that appears only when you stop resisting. When the mind is no longer running to the past or lunging toward the future or constructing heavy imagined scenarios, it begins to settle, to soften, to focus on one thing and one thing only. What you are doing right now. It is the moment when time dissolves, when effort becomes effortless, when the human blends into the activity and the activity blends into the human. Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi, the father of this concept, wrote in Flow, "The best moments in our lives are not the passive, relaxing times. The best moments usually occur if a person's body or mind is stretched to its limits in a voluntary effort to accomplish something difficult and worthwhile. The most beautiful moments are not when you rest, but when you stretch. Not too far, not too little, but just enough for every part of you to awaken." Flow lives at the precise intersection between challenge and capability, between calm and effort, between what you can already do and what you are reaching toward. In this state, you become your freest self. There is no overthinking, no inner critic, no heavy assumptions, no pressure to be perfect. Only presence, pure, unbroken, fluid, where every movement, every thought, every sensation folds into one continuous stream, like water merging into itself. Flow does not appear when you force it. It appears when you release what blocks it. The fear, the desire to control, the stories your mind invented out of protection. Flow is freedom, not of the body, but of the mind. If earlier parts taught you how to quiet your worries, regulate your emotions, simplify your thoughts, and soften the loops of fear, then flow is the natural result of all those lessons. The moment when the mind becomes clean enough for focused light to enter. A painter forgets their hand is moving. A writer forgets the passing of time. A musician forgets the room as soon as their fingers touch the keys. A person working with full presence no longer feels like they are working. They feel like they are simply alive. Nietzsche once wrote in The Birth of Tragedy, "We should consider every day lost on which we have not danced at least once, and flow is the dance of the mind, a dance without music, performed only with presence." The beauty of flow is that it is not a reward for talent, it is a reward for depth of attention. Anyone can fall into flow while making art, writing code, cooking a meal, running a steady path, or cleaning a small, quiet room. Flow does not care what you do, only how fully you are here. Flow becomes essential in the modern world, where distraction waits at every corner. Notifications, comparison, hidden pressure, silent worry. all pull you away from the present moment. But once you experience flow, you understand why it feels like returning home after a long journey, a place where your mind no longer runs, but settles into its natural rhythm. Flow is a soft medicine for the soul. In flow, you forget your pain for a moment. You forget the distorted memories. You forget the anxieties that belong to tomorrow. You forget the voice of the self that always asks for more. And in that forgetting, you become light, as if even your breath becomes part of the stream. Flow does not require perfection. It requires presence. It asks only that you be here, fully, simply, without distraction, without escape. When you offer that presence, the body and mind begin to move as one, and then you realize you can do far more than you ever imagined. As part 29 draws to a close, you may feel your mind refreshing itself, washed free of the faint dust of overthinking and return to its natural clarity. Flow is not a state for special people. It is the natural state of the mind when we remove its noise. And in this moment, as you drift gently towards sleep with this calm voice guiding you inward, perhaps you too are stepping into your own quiet stream, a deep, gentle, liberating flow that belongs only to you. And as the gentle afterglow of the flow state continues to ripple softly through your mind like a warm current gliding beneath the surface, leaving you clear, whole, and quietly luminous, the journey of this night enters its final chapter, not with noise, not with urgency, but with the same natural ease as a breath. After moving through the deepest layers of emotion, thought, awareness, memory, crisis, boundaries, inner wisdom, and presence, we now close this long circle by returning to something seemingly simple yet profoundly important. The ability to see the world as it truly is, unclouded by the misconceptions that humanity has carried across generations. If flow helps us merge with reality, this final part helps us perceive reality with greater clarity, lightly, accurately, without illusion, as though we are stepping out of a mist of ancient misunderstandings and seeing the sky as it really is. Misconceptions about the brain and the body have always lingered around us like the faint shadows of childhood stories, cultural myths, and popular beliefs passed from person to person without ever touching the ground of truth. They are like silhouettes moving quietly inside the mind, rarely harmful on their own, yet always shaping the way we see ourselves, our bodies, and the world. And to end this journey, we hold a small candle up to those shadows, not to judge them, not to dismiss them, but to gently recognize that many things we have believed for so long, things that felt almost self-evident, were never true to begin with. One of the most widespread misunderstandings is the idea that humans use only 10% of their brain. A sentence so dramatic, so mystical, so perfect for storytelling, and completely false. Neuroscience has shown clearly that nearly every region of the brain has a purpose, that the whole organ is alive, active, and engaged in the miracle of consciousness. There is no dormant 90% waiting to be unlocked. And this truth does not diminish us. It humbles us. Instead of chasing fantasies of hidden potential, we learn to honor the full 100% of a mind that has been working for us, tirelessly, every single day. Another common myth is the fear that microwave ovens cause cancer, a fear born from the moment we hear the word radiation and instantly associate it with danger. But microwave radiation is not ionizing. It does not break DNA. It does not mutate cells. It simply heats water molecules the way sunlight warms the skin. Myths like this reveal something tender about the human mind, how easily we are frightened by words, by associations, by instinctive leaps that we never pause to examine. And it is for this reason that philosophy forever invites us to slow down, to look closer, to ask deeper. Human evolution, too, is often misunderstood, the popular idea that we descended from modern monkeys. But the truth is much simpler and much more beautiful. Humans and modern monkeys share a common ancestor. Like two branches growing from the same trunk, we diverged into different paths. We did not come from them, nor they from us. We are two parallel stories rising from the same ancient soil. And that truth matters because it reminds us that humanity is not the final masterpiece of the universe, but merely one slender branch on a tree far vaster than we can imagine. The final misconception that humans sweat out toxins comes from our longing to believe that purification is something we can control with willpower. But sweat does not remove toxins. That sacred work belongs to the liver and kidneys, the silent guardians that filter our blood every moment of every day. Sweat cools us. It protects us. It keeps the body in harmony with the world around it. And when we know this, we stop forcing the body to do what is not its role, and instead learn to care for it with gentleness and understanding. What is most fascinating is that these misconceptions do not exist because people are foolish. They exist because people long for meaning. We want to believe we are extraordinary, so we believe we use only 10% of our brain. We want visible threats, so we fear microwaves. We want evolution to be simple, so we imagine a narrative that fits neatly in our minds. We want to be purer, so we imagine toxins leaving through sweat. But truth is always quieter, softer than myth. Reality does not need to be mystical to be profound. As Carl Sagan wrote in The Demon-Haunted World, it is far better to grasp the universe as it really is than to persist in delusion, however satisfying and reassuring. Beauty lives in truth, not illusion. And when we look at truth with a peaceful heart, we discover that the world has always been miraculous enough. As this final part gently comes to a close, you may feel a lightness spreading across your mind. Not because every misconception has vanished, but because you now understand that you can live with clearer wisdom, softer perception, quieter certainty. You no longer need sensational stories to feel wonder. You no longer need fear to feel cautious. You no longer need illusions to feel special. You can simply return to what is real, and what is real is already serene. And now, as your mind begins to dissolve slowly into the night, this long journey of 30 parts also settles into silence like a final breath, leaving within you the sense that even though the world is vast and often mysterious, it can become warm, gentle, and profoundly peaceful when you learn to see it with slower eyes and a heart that has been healed one layer at a time.